And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bash us, him.
All right, touch your roll call.
Here we go. Good morning, everybody. 8:05 live Eastern Time, and of course 5:05 coast to coast. Here I am in California, Pacific Coast, bright and early. We're gonna have a good one for you today. Before we get started, just want to say again, thank you so much for the love and prayers I have been getting for Derek. It's overwhelming. The support has been astronomical, and it continues. And thank God for it. I definitely needed it, and I appreciate it. So let's get into it. Today we have retired NYPD detective Patrick Donohue. I think it's a perfect week that we have you on here. Of course, he's wearing the color green. Monday was St. Patrick's Day. Today's your day, brother. A lot of our friends and listeners know Patrick Donohue. He's pretty active on the chat. Hell of a character here. I'm looking forward to this one. So, Pat, let's talk about you. Let's talk about you as a child. Let's talk about where you grew up, how you grew up, why you became a cop of the NYPD. Let's get right into it. Welcome to have you.
First off, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to come on the podcast. Who I am, where I'm from. I grew up in the Bronx. I was born and raised initially down by University Avenue and Talentine Church. And then in the late 1970s, my dad and mom informed me and my two sisters we were moving upstate, and we moved to Woodlawn in the northern section of the Bronx, the 4-7 precinct. Back then it was Sector Henry. I don't know what it is now. I came from a traditional Irish family. Both my parents are immigrants. My mother and father both came from County Galway in Ireland. Typical Irish family, large and extended. Went to Catholic grammar school, so I had the traditional Catholic grammar school upbringing. Went to a Catholic high school, Mount St. Michael Academy in the Bronx, run by the Maris brothers. Loved my time there. It was a really good foundation. I literally can't say enough about the neighborhood and the friends that I grew up with. Woodlawn is known as a blue-collar neighborhood. Tremendous civil service history there. Cops, firemen, sanitation, court officers. Right around the corner from the house that I grew up in is the Tunnel Workers Union. So it was the right neighborhood to grow up in, the right environment to grow up in, if you had any inclination of being a civil service worker. I would go as far as to say, if you didn't have that inclination, that just being in that neighborhood and seeing guys and girls get up at morning, 6 o'clock, jumping in a construction van or heading to work in their academy grays, you would kind of see that, it was a career in civil service that was looked up to in my neighborhood. Wasn't looked down at, wasn't thought as a second-class job. Mount St. Michael was a great educational background for me. All boys school. Little secret, I want to go to Cardinal Spellman High School, which wasn't that far. It was on Baychester Avenue. It was a co-ed high school, and my mother said, absolutely not. You have enough distractions in life. Let's get you to a private boys school. Sports became a very big part of my life in grammar school and then in high school. Little family fact, my dad was a very well-known athlete in Ireland. In 1966, he came to the United States for 3 months to participate in a sporting endeavor over the summer, and he wound up staying. So I can guess you say sports was a big part of my life, and it was in my DNA. Played high school basketball, baseball, football. Football gave me the opportunity to go to college. I wound up getting recruited. I played football at the University of Rhode Island for a couple of years and transferred and played at the University of New Haven. So I guess it was kind of inevitable with my sports background, my civil service, neighborhood friends and family in Woodlawn that I would gravitate towards a career in civil service.
Hey, Pat, did you live by Katona in
Yes.
Woodlawn? Oh, you did?
Correct.
Okay, that's a great street.
Yep.
Pat,
great neighborhood.
Pat, tell everybody about Woodlawn though. Like that's like a weird spot in the Bronx where I feel like people go right from Ireland to Woodlawn. Like why is that, dude? And what's up with the Irish connection and Woodlawn? Like what is that? Like there's a lot of people with brogues, Irish brogues and thick accents. What's
So I'm going to set the record straight. An Irish brogue is not an accent. An Irish brogue is a shoe. The word brogue is actually shoe in Gaelic. I'm just trying to help, John. I'm trying to help.
No, but what is it, dude?
It is referred to as a 33rd county. It was, when I moved there in the late 70s, 90% Irish. I can literally count on one hand how many non-Irish friends I had growing up. I never got the whole concept of why it became that neighborhood, but it's very reflective of New York City. You go throughout New York City, you go to Queens, you go to Brooklyn, there's pockets of neighborhood of certain ethnicities where, you know, you go to parts of the 90 and you're walking in like Little Poland, right? Yep. And then you go into the 109 and now you're in Little Korea. I guess the best thing I can come up with is a couple of families in the beginning went there, found it to be a great neighborhood. They have a pretty good public school system. PS19 was the public school. They have a Catholic school there called St. Barnabas, which is the school I attended. Very good school. So just like any parent in New York, they want the best opportunities for their children. So between the public school that was there, the Catholic grammar school that was there, and then the surrounding private high schools, I went to Mount St. Michael. You had Cardinal Spellman. You have Archbishop Stepanak. You had Iona Prep. You had All Hallows. You had Cardinal Hayes. All great Catholic private school institutions that if you're a parent and you wanted to give your children the best opportunity, it was a very good central neighborhood.
I love Woodlawn. I still have some of the old Irish stores there. And as John said, people straight off the boat, Ramblin' House, go right into Yonkers. It's a great spot. That's a great spot. Woodlawn is very cool.
I mean, you have to look at it from this mindset. I think my mom was 17 when she came to the United States. She first went to Boston and then she came down to New York. One of her sisters was here ahead of her. My dad, I believe, came when he was either 19 or 20. Just imagine that mindset of you're leaving your country where you grew up. Ireland at the time was probably a borderline third world, second world country. Where my parents from, it's very rural. And obviously you want to go somewhere where you know people and you're comfortable. All right. So, that's basically why people wind up in Woodlawn. For the Irish, you got Woodside, Queens, Maspeth, parts of Brooklyn. But it's a great neighborhood. And it still is that way. Obviously, everything changes over time. The majority of Irish dominance in Woodlawn isn't what it used to be. There's now starting to get a bit of an Albanian influx. But overall, it's a great neighborhood. I live very close to it. I'm still close to a lot of my childhood friends. And I tell everybody, if you could transplant me back in time and give me the opportunity to grow up in a neighborhood other than Woodlawn, I wouldn't take it.
Pat, what'd your dad do? Like, what you said he was an athlete? Like, what did he play? He played soccer? What was it?
No, my dad played a sport called hurling, which is a combination of field hockey and lacrosse. It's commonly referred to as the fastest land sport in the world. It's very hard to describe. I actually played it for a while. I've done every sport in the world. If you could give me the opportunity to go back to 10 years old and say, Pat, you could play one sport for the rest of your life, I would take hurling. It's great. So yeah, he came here.
I've watched that before. I watched curling. It's interesting. It's in the Olympics, right?
No. That's curling. That's from
curling,
North Canada. Yeah, hurling with an H.
Oh, hurling. Oh, okay. Now because I know curling. Now I gotta look this up. What's hurling?
Or as they say in Woodlawn, H.
Like, when you say hurling, I think of a night out and I have to go hurl in the corner.
Yeah. No, that was March 17th.
Yeah, I'm sure that was Monday, right?
Yeah.
Well, tell us about what did you do for St. Patrick's Day?
St. Patrick's Day for me has changed over the years. Just like every brand new cop, you put on the blues, you go down to Fifth Avenue, you dress up, you march, then you head over to the pier. Later in my career, I was involved with the Emerald Society Board and then the DEA Board. So it became a working day. I would go over there and help fundraise. The DEA has the Jack Healy Corner in memory of former Vice President of the DEA, Jack Healy, who we sadly lost to cancer. They set up a little fundraiser for him. Make sure that the members and their guests are taken care of. In recent years, my St. Patrick's Day has taken a bit of a solemn turn. My best friend that I've met on the job and my greatest life influence outside my family was a girl by the name of Natalie Brill. There she is right there. Natalie used to meet up with her mother every year on St. Patrick's Day, and they would take a picture, and it was the highlight of Nat's day. Tragically, in 2021, we lost Natalie to 9/11 breast-related cancer. And since that day, I go to her cemetery grave and I visit her and I lay flowers down. Nat and I made a lot of promises to her as she was battling cancer and then subsequently when she was in hospice. And one of those promises was that I would make sure that nobody ever forgot her. That was one of her biggest fears, is that, people would forget her. And I vowed in hospice that I would not forget her, and I will talk about every opportunity I get.
It's I mean, sorry about your friend, dude. It's too many people. I think that's the one thing. And I know there's a lot of us, but in this profession, I mean, so many people that went before that time. It's crazy. It's honestly, it's sorry. I don't know. I don't really have the words, but yeah. So Pat, so what was it like? Like why? I know you said like you're in a blue collar neighborhood. You play sports, so it was like it wasn't too far fetched for you to become a police officer. But what actually made you pull the trigger? Like why'd you take the test? Like what happened to you? Where were you? What were you doing?
All right. So the earliest indication that I would maybe go into a career in law enforcement, it took place in high school. I was a senior in high school. We had an abbreviated schedule, so I had gone home early and I was on my way back to school for football practice. And I was about 2 blocks away from Mount St. Michael Academy, and I looked out to my left, and Mount St. Michael had very distinguished uniform. We had V-neck sweaters that every class had to wear, and each class had a different color. So just out of the corner of my eye, I looked and I saw a couple of freshmen. First, I recognized them by their sweater color, and then I recognized them that they were from Woodlawn. And they were surrounded by people that didn't go to Mount St. Michael High School. And with my cop experience now, I recognize that a robbery was taking place. They were being robbed. So I had a 75 Dodge Swinger, brown, with a tan top. Without thinking, I pulled up on a sidewalk, jumped out, grabbed the 2 kids, threw them in my car, took off back to Woodlawn, dropped them off at their house, drove back to Mount St. Michael. In typical discipline fashion, I was late for practice and I was forced to run. I didn't say anything about what happened. I was late. There was no argument. All right. And then the next day, I guess the parents had called the school to let them know that, the boys were basically almost robbed and that I had gotten involved. And the school made a big to-do about it. There was an announcement over the PA system. I got embarrassed. And then one of my teachers pulled me to the side and said, "Hey, how do you feel about that?" And I said, "I felt pretty good." And he literally said, "You can get paid to do that. You should consider a career in law enforcement." Didn't say yes at the time, didn't say no, but I guess that was the original seed being planted. Also in my family growing up, we were always taught if there was any problems or if you were in trouble, you go to the police, you go to the firehouse, you go to a teacher, you go to somebody from the church. All right. So, there was constant positive reinforcement growing up. Fast forward to college, I'm away playing football, and unbeknownst to me, my mother had actually signed me up for the exam. I actually never signed up for the exam. My mother had filled out the application, signed it up in typical Irish fashion. I had to pay her back the $30, and that was how I got the start of my career. My mother actually was also an inspiration for me. She had become a teacher with the New York City Board of Ed. She taught mentally disabled children. In high school and grammar school, whenever I had days off, I would actually go with her to school. That was probably my first career choice. I thought I was going to be a physical education teacher, and I was going to work with adaptive physical education geared towards people with mental and physical disabilities. And then just by osmosis, I wound up becoming a cop.
I think it's a great story. I mean, a lot of people here comment, and it's a great story because I think for the most part, we hear that people become cops because maybe it was a deity in their family, or they were told to take the test because they came from a blue collar neighborhood. But you have a story where someone identified that you actually had the potential characteristics and traits to become a police officer, which we don't necessarily see right now for people getting on the job. So what year was it that you got on the job, and where did you land as a rookie? Tell us about life as a rookie in the police department. What were you doing? What were your thoughts? And where were you working?
I got hired in the April 1997 class. Shout out to 9738. There's still a couple of my friends active. Went through the academy. Had a very great carpool. A couple of great guys. just like anybody else in the academy, you filled out the dream sheet, and I wound up going to Bronx Transit Task Force, which is the modern day version of the late night train patrol. Funny story is when they read out. Funny story when they read out the transfers. Everybody there, guys are going to Midtown South and Brooklyn, and they read out Bronx Transit Task Force. And I literally said, "Holy crap! I'm going to Bronx Task Force. Like I'm not even going to a pre." I was like, "I'm already going to a detail. This is pretty good." So that was my first welcome to Earth moment. So I was assigned to Bronx Transit Task Force, and we turned out of 161st Street, which is District 11, but we weren't assigned to District 11. That was just where our command was. So we covered late night train patrol in District 11 and District 12. So we had 2 sets of tours. We had 8 at night to 4 in the morning and 10 at night to 6 in the morning. So it was 1 week of 8 to 4, 1 week of 10 to 6. And it was usually pre-tour, post-tour overtime. And I loved it. I loved it. I used to joke towards the end of my career, they always say, if you ever stepped on it and you had to get launched somewhere, where would you want to go? I'd be like, send me right back to transit. It was a unique time going to transit. 1997 was 2 years after the hostile takeover. So there was a lot of resentment from the original transit PD. But the one thing that I benefited from was you didn't get that isolated, shut up rookie treatment. They literally talked to you from the first day you walked into the command, and they made sure you understood what it was to be a cop, what it was to be a transit cop, and most importantly is how to sign out at the end of every tour. And it was just great. I absolutely loved it.
So, Pat, when we come back, first, this podcast is being brought to you by Fund the First. When we come back, could you just walk us into what New York was like in 1997 from your perspective, and crime, and what your mission was and all that? But before we do that, let's just pay a little tribute to Fund the First.
Ever wonder who helps our everyday heroes when they need support? Enter fundthefirst.com, a unique crowdfunding platform dedicated to first responders, their families, and their friends. Unlike typical sites, we don't take a cut. Every dollar goes directly to those in need. Whether it's for emergency medical bills, family emergencies, or equipment, fundthefirst.com is there. It's our chance to give back to those who risk it all for us. From police officers to firefighters, these heroes deserve our support. Want to make a real impact? Check out fundthefirst.com and show our heroes that we've got their backs. It's time to support those who always support us.
Yeah, so Fund the First. That was a fundraising platform created by NYPD detective Rob Garland. We're gonna get him on here too to get his story. But yeah, but this show is about Pat Donohue. So let's continue to walk through that. Like, what was that 1997 New York City kid from Woodlawn? What was the crime rates like? What was it? Was it culture shock going into the NYPD? What was it?
So, I mean, anybody that went through the academy, you always hear about culture shock, and they used to target the guys and girls from Long Island and upstate Cupcake, New York. I grew up in the Bronx. I was raised in the Bronx, and I still experience culture shock. I consider myself a Bronx guy, a New York City guy, but I'm 24 years old. I'm given a uniform. I'm given a gun and a badge, and I'm told to go out and ride the train by myself at night. It was a very unique experience. Loved it. I think one of the best things that ever occurred by starting out my career in transit was you really learn how to talk to people. All right. I remember one of the veterans there told us, your mouth will get you in trouble and your mouth can get you out of trouble. It's how you use your mouth while you're a cop, while you're out on the trains, that's going to dictate what your day is like. And I really took that to heart. Anybody that knows me, they jokingly say I'm typical Irish. I could talk forever. I used to ask people how their day was. Sometimes when we worked 8 at night to 4 in the morning or 10 at night to 6 in the morning, you get a whole kaleidoscope of emotions from people riding the train. Some people are coming home from work, they look exhausted. Then you have that period from midnight to 3 a.m. where, homeless, people that were kicked out of the house, people coming home from a late night. And then as you get towards the end of your shift, you get the people that are getting up super early to go to work. The hotel workers, the construction workers. I used to ask everybody how their day was. I would say hello. All right. And sometimes the reaction you got back was kind of comical. They would like look at you and say, why are you asking me how my day was? All right. There's a person that I met on the job. His name is Joe Fox. He's a retired chief. And I know that there's been comments made about him on here. One of the best things I ever learned from Joe Fox was, every day we go on patrol, every day you're in the squad and you go out and you do a canvas, we have the blessed opportunity to maybe change somebody's perception of law enforcement. All right. And it's not a task where like we're trying to convert people like we're door-to-door religious people trying to convert. But I really believe if you just take the time to treat people like you want to be treated, and it could do a great service to our profession to maybe get it back to where it was years ago. And I took that to heart in transit, and it was great. I met some interesting people on the train that I had a relationship with for a long time. A lot of good friendships started with a little, hello, how are you? How's your day?
You know what I think is great? I could tell right away. Listen, Pat, we've gotten to know you, on the chat, but getting to see you in person is even better. But there's no doubt in my mind, I can tell right now that you were definitely a good cop, because what you're indicating is what I always talk about. Knowing your post, knowing the baseline, and that's what you're doing. You're telling us, the time that you're working, you knew the people that worked at that time commuting on the train, you knew the nomenclature in comparison to someone that worked during the day. You just described it, right? People coming home, they're tired. You knew the homeless that were there. That's what a good cop does. So here you are. You got on the job at 97. You're working in transit. And I think it's interesting, right? It's a pinnacle time because you had a couple of years to really become a cop. And then, of course, 9/11 hits and everything changes. So if you could tell us about your experience, what was it like being a cop before 9/11? And what was your experience with 9/11? How did that change or shape the trajectory of your career and your life in general?
So, I got on in 97. The crime reduction surge that had started before I got hired was still evident. It was a numbers-driven department, but I think it got a little bit worse afterwards. Like I said, started my career in 97 in Bronx Transit. In 1997 and 1999, I experienced an off-duty incident, which was a situation where I put myself in a situation where I could have handled it better. Great life experience for me. And as a result, I wound up with a little highway therapy, and I wound up down in District 4, Manhattan, Union Square. Everybody needs to find maturity in some way, some shape, some fashion on the job. Unfortunately, I found mine in not the best situation. But it was a great learning opportunity. Went down to District 4. Firm believer, everything in life happens for a reason. All right. I was literally probably about 2 weeks away from becoming a plainclothes borough-wide transit cop in the Bronx based on my activity and what I had done. And I ruined it. And it was a great life learning experience. As a result, I became sober. All right. I'm not too ashamed to admit that. Got sober in June of 1999, and I've been sober to this day ever since. Great life experience. Wound up down to District 4. Everything happens for a reason. 5th Platoon, plain clothes, worked for some great cops. Pete Bainey, Dave Kelb, they were my primary partners down there, and great opportunity. And again, it would probably be the second place I would want to end my career if I had to go back. We covered 125 and Lex down to Broadway Lafayette, the entire east side in the subway system, plain clothes. And again, you want to talk about a complete spectrum of human beings you encountered on a daily basis. You had the millionaire going to work on Wall Street, sitting next to the homeless guy who hasn't had a job in 5 years on the train. All right. And you just see I used to call the subway the great moving magnet, because it had just attracted every quality of every person in life onto that conveyance means and got you where you were going. great times. Throughout our career, when we were in law enforcement, we learned great bosses. And that's where I really started to get into my exposure to great bosses. I never went the boss route on the job, but I really worked for great bosses that, you know, I learned what it was like to be treated like an adult, have some responsibility. If you respected the responsibility, you got more responsibility. If you didn't respect the responsibility, well, then it got pulled back. All right. Paul Bazin was one of my supervisors. Sergeant, great guy, loved him. Manny Batista was the lieutenant that I worked for, who is now a lawyer. I believe at one time he was working for the Brooklyn DA's office. Just really great guys. They showed it what it was like. 9/11, interesting time for me. So the day before 9/11, the Yankees were hosting the Boston Red Sox. I was working paid detail in uniform, and I was assigned to the game at Yankee Stadium. The game wound up getting rained out. Because of my Irish nature, I had met a couple of tourists in town and it said, hey, why waste the night? Let's go down to Manhattan. So I wound up going down to Manhattan, went to a buddy's bar, and we hung out and, did the town. I was a great tourist ambassador for the New York City Police Department, as many cops who get the opportunity take that opportunity. And around 5 o'clock in the morning, the night ended for us, and I brought them back to the hotel with the promise, I just have to go to a BS training session up in the Bronx today. Once training's over, I'll meet you girls for dinner, and we'll continue what we started. And went home, took a shower, brushed my teeth, drove to Bronx Disorder Control, which was the old 4-4 on the Deegan Service Road there. I had volunteered to go down to Washington, D.C. for the Expeditionary Task Force. The World Economic Forum was scheduled to take place a few weeks after 9/11, and the D.C. cops had sent out a request for mutual aid, and the NYPD had agreed to send down 1,000 or 1,500 cops. Just like every other training, you figure nothing's going to happen. I remember walking in there. I was the only one there from my command. Muster room, to set up the TV, sit down. I have no energy. I am completely tired. And I remember there was two gentlemen sitting in front of me from Manhattan South Task Force. To this day, I can't get their name. And I hope if somebody knows who they are, please let me know who they are. And one guy just turned around and he looks and goes, you're tired. And I gave him the whole story. And he says, don't worry about it. Put your eyes down. We'll cover for you. And we start watching the riots on TV from Seattle as part of a training mechanism. And, you have cops from Brooklyn and Staten Island and Queens. Everybody's got their radio on, and then you start to hear the radios chirp. And the initial reports came in was that a Cessna plane had crashed into the Twin Towers. And I remember it kind of startled me. Driving from Woodlawn to Bronx Disorder Control, I went straight down the Deegan. I remember looking up, and it was the bluest sky I'd ever seen in my life. There was not a cloud. So my first thought was, how did they hit the Twin Towers? How did they not see it? And Bronx Task Force is there. The building starts to buzz. You start hearing, more chatter, the radio, and eventually they turn the video off and they put on the TV. And, you see the first tower. And I remember just looking at myself and said, there's no way that's a Cessna. We literally watched the second plane hit. At that point, it's just basically organized chaos. There's people running around. They're opening up closets they've never opened up before, and they're starting to prepare to mobilize and deploy. They send us out to a car, get our riot helmets. Full disclosure, I actually had my helmet in the car with me. Now, how they always tell you, bring your bats and hats when you go to training. I did, and we wound up loading on a bus. And again, this sergeant, don't know who he was, he literally started pointing people out as they were getting on the bus. He's like, you, grab 5 of us. He's like, I don't know who you are. You look like if something happens down there, you could protect yourself and protect each other. Stay together. Don't go anywhere else. We loaded up on a bus. We took the Deegan down to FDR. We wound up getting stopped at Pike and South Street. The bus was the quietest bus ride I've ever been in my entire life. Full disclosure, I was sitting in the back of the bus by myself. I was so nervous. I had a Gatorade bottle with me that was quite large, and that Gatorade bottle came to use for me. And I remember I was so embarrassed that I had to take a piss in the back of the bus. I felt like a little less of a man considering where we were going, but I was just completely nervous. scared, had no idea what was going on. Used the Gatorade bottle, dumped it out the window, and then about 2 seconds later, I heard, "Hey, can I get that bottle?" And I wasn't the first guy on the bus to use the bottle, and I wasn't the last guy. A lot of guys are nervous. I remember calling my sister and asking her to reach out to my father, who was in Ireland at the time, let him know that I was okay and I was going downtown. Called, left a voicemail for my mother, and she kept it. So for some of you new listeners, there used to be a device that was electronic, and you plugged it into your phone. And if you called the house and nobody was there, you could actually leave a voicemail message, and it was on a machine, had a little mini cassette desk. My mother kept that, and I remember listening to the messages. And my mother, before I lost her, she cried a lot about it. I was dating a girl in California at the time, and she had reached out to me and basically said, "I don't want you to go down." And I told her I'm going down, and that was basically the last conversation I had with her, where she's like, "Well, if you go down, I'm never going to call you again." And I'm like, "Well, if you call me and I don't answer the phone, there's a reason to it."
See ya.
That day was crazy. As we're going down the FDR, I can vividly remember people walking up the FDR, both the promenade and on the service road. And the further south we got, the more people didn't look like human beings. They looked like some kind of characters out of a movie set. At first, they were slightly covered in dust. Then they were more covered in dust. And then it got to the point where we got down by the old Pathmark on Pike and South Street, which isn't there anymore. You couldn't tell if they were male, female, black, white, Spanish. They were completely covered. They set us up there. We did a decon. It's a day that I could live and relive over and over again. I remember performing decon on some people coming back from the collapse, hosing them down, not recognizing who they were. And the second you clear them off, you're like, "Holy crap, that's so-and-so, that's Liam, that's Steve." It was a crazy day. Eventually, we got dismissed around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and we were told to report to our permanent commands. So we had to make our way back from Manhattan South, back up to the Bronx. I drove to my dad's apartment in Mount Vernon, got a change of clothes, and went back down to Union Square. I remember walking into the command, and there was a sergeant by the name of Boucher who was walking out. And he just ran up to me, he gave me a big hug, and he said, "You're on the list." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "You're on the list. We didn't know where you were." Now, they knew I was at training for the day, but they were unable to track me down and locate me. I guess they called Bronx Disorder Control, and they're like, "We mobilized them, we don't know where they are." He then told me that I was on the list with Mark Ellis and Ray Suarez. Mark Ellis and Ray Suarez were two guys that I worked with at District 4. And I remember walking into the command. There was a lieutenant at the time on the desk, Lieutenant Becker. She ran up to me and gave me a big hug. And she said, "We can't find Mark and we can't find Ray." Tragically, we did not find them until weeks after 9/11. Two amazing individuals that left such an impact on me that, again, I feel the need to tell stories about them. Ray Suarez was a fitness fanatic. He was big into karate, and at the time, he was a track coach for his daughter. And we didn't work the same platoon, but every now and then we would get partnered up together. And I remember we were working one day, and he says, "You ever think about taking up running?" And I said, "Nah." I said, "Running's punishment. I played football, I played basketball, I played every sport. When you screwed up, get on the line, blow the whistle, and you would run." So for me, running wasn't a good thing, it was a bad thing. And in college, we used to have this thing called Dawn Patrol, where if you screwed up really bad, you would have to get up at 5 in the morning and run until you vomited and then keep running. I was well known to Dawn Patrol. And Ray told me, "Hey, don't look at running as negative. It's a positive. It's chicken soup for your mind." And I just laughed it off. But after we lost Ray, there was a period of my life where I was a runner. And I could tell you right now, Ray Suarez was 100% correct. And anybody on the podcast that's a runner, they know it. You get out there, you put the sneakers on, you put your earbuds in, and it is one of the most best mental exercises. I think it's more mental than physical. So that's my Ray Suarez story. And then Mark Ellis. Mark Ellis was a new cop. Wasn't a traditional street cop, but he was a great human being. The Friday before 9/11, the Department Recognition Committee for District 4 met. I was the chairperson at the time, and Mark Ellis had a few submissions in. Committee gets together, we review it. Some are routine patrol, some are approved. I think Mark had 4 or 5 submissions in. Literally waited about 2.5 hours on his own time after tour. Meeting's over, we come out, and he's sitting in roll call. And he says, how'd it go? And I said, Mark, I got good news and bad news. What do you want? He says, give me the bad news. I said, well, some of your submissions were deemed routine patrol. I go, but some of them were approved. He goes, what did I get? I said, I got EPDs. He literally started jumping up and down in roll call, screaming, I got a rack. I now have a rack. And I remember like laughing because, Eric's done God's work. John's done God's work, except for his time as building maintenance. And hashtag. And I remember just laughing to myself. And he literally skipped out of the command. That was on a Friday. 9/11 took place on Tuesday. And we lost Mark. And I remember a couple days afterwards, I walked into the admin office and I said, hey, I need a favor. I said, the committee met and we had done these submissions. Mark had some submissions in. And I told the story how he reacted to getting an EPD jumping up and down, and he got a rack and he got his rack. And the admin lieutenant at the time kind of looked at me. He's like, are you kidding me? With everything going on right now, you're worried about medals? And I said, when we find Mark, I want his family to know that he received medals for his police work and that how much it meant to him. CEO saw through the picture. I put the admin lieutenant in his place. He said, we signed it, and he ordered me down to 1PP. And I went down to 1PP, and I thought I was going to get the same reaction from the lieutenant. And, personnel was on board. They signed off on it immediately. So for anybody out there doing police work and they say, I'm not going to write it up, it's just an EPD, I'm going to tell you, to Mark Ellis, that was the greatest thing that ever happened to him. And unofficially, he has the shortest time between achieving the lowest medal for the department, which is the EPD, to receiving the top medal. And so that was my 9/11 experience. I remember going to work, working for 2.5 weeks straight. It was just crazy, a crazy time.
Crazy. Pat, before we go further in your career, you spoke about being sober since 1999. A lot of people struggle with alcohol. I've seen a lot of good guys ruin careers, just great things over alcohol. And a lot of people have bounced back, but like, what's your advice? Anybody on the job, young, old, whatever, and the use of alcohol while they're, you forget about it in life in general. What's your advice towards alcohol use? Like, what are your thoughts on it? Like, what do you think? How do you stay away from alcohol yourself? And like, what have you seen? I mean, obviously, you've been a delegate. You've been on the job since 1999. I mean, since 1997. You've dealt with issues yourself. Like, any advice you could give to anybody out there?
Yeah, listen, I'm not anti-alcohol. I'm not one of these reformist that says it's evil, let's bring back prohibition. One of the best lines I learned in my sobriety was, alcohol is for somebody, it's not for everybody. Okay. With anything in life that's that alters the mind or the body, respect it and be aware. All right. And if you want to go out and have a few, do it responsibly. All right. We talked about, and John just alluded to it, I did 25 years, 1997 to 2022. And throughout everybody's career, there's these seminal moments that stick with you forever. One of them for me was a very good friend, and I'm not ashamed to admit it, as a new cop, he was one of my role models. I looked up to him. I thought he was a legend. His name is Kevin Spellman. He goes by the nickname Spike. Kevin Spellman is a great friend, and again, a mentor, somebody I looked up to. You know, Kevin unfortunately made a tragic decision to one night get behind the wheel of a car after being out. Kevin accidentally struck and hit a female pedestrian on the road, and she died. Kevin went to jail as a result of the criminal case. And watching somebody I looked up to have their world turned upside down. I remember going to Bronx Courthouse during that trial. Kevin's brother-in-law is a lifelong friend who I've played sports with. Kevin's sister is somebody who I hold in high regard. And having to walk her out of court and hide her from the media frenzy that was there as a result of her brother's decision was something that was one of those moments in my career that really stood out. Kevin went to jail. All right. And then when Kevin got out of jail, he reached out to me in an effort to help get him back into society. I literally was in contact with Kevin yesterday. I asked Kevin when he got out, would he be willing to come to new detective orientations for the DEA? Because anybody that goes for an orientation with the DEA, they explain the new benefits and health coverage and your annuity and this and that. And the lawyers get up and they talk about what's hot and current topics. And, you know, they talk about, you know, drinking and driving and the dangers and so forth. I asked Kevin and Kevin agreed. He volunteered. He said he would come to every orientation because I could stand up there and say, hey guys, don't drink and drive. Because if you do, you're going to ruin your career. All right. You know, we all know it's cheaper to take a cab or Uber from LA to New York City than to get arrested for a DWI in New York City, especially as a New York City cop, between the suspension, loss of overtime, insurance going up through the roof. But I think if Kevin Spellman got in front of a group of 25 to 30 new detectives or cops in the academy or bosses at BMOC and said, hey, don't drink and drive. Let me tell you about my story. Let me tell you about, you know, I had a newborn child that I didn't see in their formative early years because I was in jail. So my best advice for anybody is just be respectful. All right. And it is an intoxicant. It's gonna alter your perception and thinking. All right. There really is no reason right now anybody should get behind the car wheel drinking and driving. You got Uber, you got Lyft. All right. Use them. Very simple.
Pat, I can tell you this. I'm glad that you were in the union because I love the way you talk about people. It's obvious you care about people because it was so depictive in how you explained unfortunate, untimely death of Ray and the way you described with Mark Ellis, especially the short stint of him getting an EPD to getting the highest medal possible. And the way you talked about people is obviously you definitely belong to the union. There's no doubt about it. So here you are, post 9/11. Tell us, bring us to that point, post 9/11. What was it like being a cop at that point? Were you getting acknowledged by the community? Did you feel that you were revered at this time? What was it like post 9/11 as far as being out in the street? Did you feel like you were treated as heroes? And if so, how long did that last?
I wouldn't even say heroes. There was a period of time where it was uncomfortable, but we were like almost rock star status. I remember driving down the West Side Highway and you would literally see people standing out there post 9/11, you know, with signs, you know, little children standing with signs made at OTAG that they made with at school, waving to us, thanking us. It lasted for a good amount of time. You know, the city had rallied around, you know, FDNY, NYPD, Port Authority, state courts. You know, let's not forget our civilian brothers and sisters that help down there. You know, the iron workers, the construction workers. You know, it was probably the most proud moment of my career being with the NYPD. You know, we traveled post 9/11 to Chicago for a parade. And it was like, we weren't visiting cops. We were like, felt like the Beatles. Everywhere you walked in your uniform, it was great. But that period, post 9/11, the United States rallied. Everybody got behind each other. There was less divisiveness that we have today in society. I was proud to be a New York City cop, and I loved it. It was also one of the scariest times I've ever had on this job. There was thoughts that something else was going to happen. When I was in District 4, we were assigned to uniform patrol in the subway. And our goal was to make sure there was no attacks. There was a strong belief that there would be attacks in the subway system. Because, if you have an attack in the subway system, the fear of people riding the trains again will be astronomical. And it would have a ripple effect of shutting down the economy and the viability of New York City. So we literally, every entrance into and out of Manhattan, they had a subway, they had a uniformed cop on the platform. North end of the southbound platform, south end of the northbound platform. And you literally stood there for 12 to 14 hours. 9/11 was a pivotal moment in my career. I've had a great career. I've been blessed, and it started there. A couple weeks after 9/11, I was transferred to Intel. Didn't fill out a 57, had no application in. I remember getting a summons back to the command, walked in, and the sergeant was filling out a command log entry, and I had been transferred to Intel, the mayor's executive protection detail. I thought it was a joke. At the time, there was a mentor named John Uvain who worked on Rudy Giuliani's security detail. And because of death threats against the mayor at that time, they had created what they called Eagle Support Task Force, which was a plainclothes task force to go to events with the mayor, blend in with the crowd, and try to identify threats. John Uvain on September 11, 2001 was the detective that jumped on top of Rudy when the buildings collapsed to protect him. As a result of that, when they were forming this task force, they told him, hey, John, you can pick one guy on this task force. I played on the Gaelic football team with John Uvain, and literally that's how I got my opportunity. I was playing close qualified in transit, and I went from, that's a picture of me in football uniform, and that is one of my college teammates' son. That's in Austin, Texas. He's about 6'4", 6'5" right now. He's about, I think, 18 or 19. So, a sports opportunity. Like I said, my dad came to this country to play hurling. He also played Gaelic football. I played Gaelic football as my first sport growing up. And through the Gaelic football team, I was given an opportunity to go to Mayor Giuliani's support detail. Initially, we were playing close counter surveillance. So if the mayor was making an appearance at a wake or at a public-related event, we'd get there 2 hours early, blend in with the crowd, keep our ears open. It was mind-boggling, to say the least. Prior to October 6, 2001, I'm a uniformed cop standing on a subway platform at Grand Central to make sure there's no bombs. Now I'm doing plainclothes counter surveillance for the mayor. Yeah, that's another picture. I know Jonathan Fredericks loves the fact that I wear the short shorts. He's probably going to print that out, laminate it, put it on his wall.
It's going to say, I like little boys.
And so I did that. Eventually, they put a suit and tie. We did a regular security detail for the mayor. And then subsequently, I was promoted to detective in a very short period of time. I did not do the full 18 months. When I got transferred to that temporary assignment, I was told, you have 3 months and we don't know what's going to happen. All right. I've been blessed. I was beneficial. I got a detective shield. And then they said, where do you want to go? Because Mayor Giuliani's time was ending and Michael Bloomberg was taking over. And I had no idea. I said, just send me back to District 4. I'm good. I want to go back to 5th Platoon playing clothes with Dave Kelb and Pete Bainey and Manny Batista and Paul Bazin. And they said, no, you can't go back. That's when I learned job politics. All right. They offered me JTTF. I looked at them and said, what is JTTF? They're like, it's a Joint Terrorist Task Force. And I said, I have no idea what that is, and I'm not comfortable going there. I'd just been given a shield. I knew nothing about being a detective. I did not know how to conduct investigations. So I requested the warrant squad. And I can remember the look on their face when they said, are you really sure you want to go to the warrant squad? I said, absolutely. I had friends that were working in there at the time, guys that I looked up to in my career. Kevin Spellman was in Bronx warrants at the time. Keith Irving was another guy I played on the football team with. He was working in Bronx Warrants. John Muldoon, John Garrity, great guys that were the real police. And in typical job fashion, I could not, I had to think about it. So a day later, I came back in and they said, "Where do you want to go?" I said, "Warrants." And they said, "Great." Next, you know, they were going to assign me to Bronx Warrants. I turned it down. And I said, I wanted to go to Manhattan. And they said, "You live in Woodlawn?" Hey, my buddy Beetlejuice. Yeah, I went to Manhattan Warrants, and it was kind of funny because when I went for the interview, they said, "Well, you live in Woodlawn. Why don't you want to work in Bronx Warrants? It's in the 5-0. It's the next precinct over." And I respectfully told them that I just started sobriety, and I thought that Manhattan Warrant Squad would be a better pathway to that. And it was a great decision. I loved it.
So how do you get involved in the union? How does that happen? Like, were you in the union when you were a cop in Transit District? Were you a delegate then, or did you start to get involved in the detective rank? Like, how does that happen?
So I was brought to a social club. I was thrown in the back of a car. I was blindfolded. I was brought to a social club, walked down these dark set of steps, and next thing you know, they put some cards in my hand.
Was
was the back of the club or the front?
No. I was always told the more you put in anything in life, the more you get out of it. I've been involved in a lot of great endeavors when I was on the police department. The Gaelic Football Club, tremendous fundraiser. They have a motto, "Keep the heritage alive." NYPD football team, I loved it. Played there for almost 16, 17 years. Emerald Society, I was a delegate. I was a board officer there. So I've always naturally been inclined to get involved, and you know, the more you give, the more you get back. Anybody that's on the job always identifies mentors or people that have influence on them in their career. And one of my greatest influence and mentors was a guy by the name of John McGuire. John was somebody I knew prior to getting on the job. He had gone to the same high school as me, but he was a little bit older. That's not John McGuire. That's Mariano Rivera. So at the time, John was a aspiring delegate. He had been a delegate in Vice, transferred to OSID, and was running for the delegate spot in OSID. My office was newly transplanted into OSID, and John had come by the office, campaigned. I vouched for John, watched John he became a delegate, then he became a board officer. And naturally, he would lean on me for assistance in helping him perform some basic tasks. And I guess he kind of saw that I had potential, and he encouraged me to. It was kind of very telling of my personality. There was 2 delegates at OSID at the time. John was a board officer, so he was untouchable. And there was another delegate who was a good guy, right? But just wasn't a good delegate, you know, not that visible. The communication wasn't what I thought a delegate should have in regards to keeping the members aware and abreast. And it was suggested to him to make me his alternate. That way I could help him. You know, the difference between a delegate and an alternate is the delegate gets a stipend, the alternate doesn't. His exact words were, "Absolutely not. I'm not going to make him my alternate. If he thinks he can become a delegate, he could challenge me and beat me, but it's not going to happen." Now, I sat on that for a little while, and then eventually got to the point. To become a delegate by means of challenge is a very complicated process with the DEA. First, you have to request a petition from the trustee of the borough, which I did. You then have to get 51% of the command represented by that delegate spot sign a petition to say, "Yes, we agree, there should be an election." Once you get that 51%, then you have an election. So I requested a petition, and I went around, visited offices, and I got more than enough signatures. I won the election pretty handily. And then I became a delegate. And it was probably the most rewarding time of my career. I loved my work with the union. I gave as much as humanly possible, I believe. I wasn't perfect. It's a learning experience. But I always felt that at the end of the day, I could go to bed and put my head down and say, "You did your best today to help people, Pat." And I still do it even in retirement. I still get phone calls. I still get text messages asking people for help. Became a delegate for a while, got involved. John McGuire had filed for retirement, and then Joe Cusinelli, who was the trustee for headquarters division at the time, had filed for retirement. So I threw my hat in the ring and won an election. It was 2 weeks of running around, showing face, making promises, and it was a very rewarding time. I had the opportunity to represent the detectives in the headquarters division for the DEA. So the DEA has Bronx, Brooklyn South, Brooklyn North, Queens, Staten Island, Manhattan North, Manhattan South, and then you have headquarters. So headquarters are responsible for every detective in that building, and then we cover a lot of satellite units like Intel, TARU, DETF, Strike Force, OSID. So I wasn't confined to one borough, literally covered the entire city. And it was a great time. I loved it, really did. The union I joined when I did with the DEA was like people on the job that I revered and I looked up to. Again, we always try to get that mentor status. I joined the union that had guys like George Farback, Vic Sapulo, Kenny Sparks, Paul Morrison, who's one of my very good friends to this day. Just my first trustee meeting when I sat at the table, I remember looking around going, I can't believe that I'm sitting with these guys. And they were job legends. And it was a great learning experience. I was a sponge. So that's basically how I wound up getting involved in the union.
That's a great point. You said that you learned a lot and you were a sponge. So what did you learn at the union? What was different now that you had a role in the union compared to before? What did you like about it? What did you see? And what did you carry with that throughout your career and in life, like the tools and the skills that you learned in the union?
I learned that the union, John McGuire had a great line. Hours, salary, and working conditions are the primary responsibility for any union in regards to its members. A lot of the extra stuff that we get involved in is above and beyond the mandatory scope of a union official. The greatest advice John ever gave me was under promise, over deliver. All right. And tell people the truth from the beginning. They may not want to hear it, but sometimes that's who you have to be. Some of the best compliments I ever got started with a curse, where you get that initial phone call or you get that initial call out response to a union related matter. And you assess it, you talk to the supervisors, whoever's covering it, IAB inspections. And, sometimes you have to turn and look at the member and tell her or tell him, hey, this is going to hurt. It's not going to be good. This might start with a modification or a suspension. There'll be a long process. And this is what it's going to take for you to get back to the good graces of the department and full status. And we have the unenviable responsibility to tell people what they don't want to hear when they need to hear it. And that came right from John McGuire. And I'll mention his name as much as possible because he truly is one of my best mentors. And I've delivered those words that no detective wants to hear, like, this is going to hurt. This is going to not be good for a while. And, I've been cursed at, I've been fingers pointed at. And then, a couple months down the road, you get that, hey, I need to apologize. And I tell nobody they don't have to apologize to me. And people told me what I wanted to hear. You told me what I needed to hear, but I chose not to listen to you. All right. So it's rewarding. The best thing about being in the union for me, and I think for everybody, is you get to help people. Cops are naturally helpers. Going into the union world, you have another responsibility to help people. And I will say this for every union, and I know sometimes this show has maybe been anti-union in the past. The union does more good work than people will ever know. All right. I've had a relationship that suffered because of my union activity. My phone literally would ring 24/7, 365. All right. And I had a girlfriend at the time who wanted to know why I got a call at 2:00 in the morning, and it was a female voice. All right. And I had to explain to her it was somebody that was involved in a potentially off-duty domestic incident with their MOS partner, and you had to, see what it was and triage it. Even in retirement, I still get phone calls, I still get text messages, but bottom line is the ability to help people was probably the most rewarding aspect of being in the union.
So I just got to push back 1 second. I don't think that we're anti-union here at all. We're not, but we call like like we talk about things, from what's being discussed in the locker room, what we think, our honest opinions, and that is like there is a consensus out there that as the politics in New York City changed, so has the union. Like it's not just us, it's not just me and Eric saying it. There is a big I mean, you could even look at the comments here. It's not a union, it's a club. It's not a union, it's a fraternal organization. And I'll be the first to say that I take my hats off to anybody that's gonna take on that additional responsibility. And like you said, deal with a lot of situations that nobody really wants to deal with. You know what I mean? So like I take my hat off to the union totally. I know Eric does too. I think there are things that the union does that's unbelievable. And I think, in the last probably 5 years, I became critical of the union with a lot of things, not just COVID, with the legislation, with the backing of anti-police politicians, with the donations to anti-police politicians. And I believe they're fair criticisms. I do. I think that and I think it's well-deserved criticism too. And the same for Joe Fox. Listen, I love Joe Fox. I think Joe Fox approach to policing and to supervision, I respect him totally. I do. But I also got to call out the bullshit when I see, he's on the CCRB board and he's not holding up to what I thought he should do. Like, I'm also holding his feet to the fire. But you'll never hear me be anti Joe Fox. I think he's a great guy. I think he was a great civil servant. I think he was a great chief. I do. And I think and honestly, I always looked up to Joe Fox. I still do. I just don't think that I'm just not happy with his reign as the CCRB chair. And I know the situation he's in. I do. I'm fully aware of it. I completely understand it. But I call it out. I voted for Trump 3 times. I've been beating Trump up ever since he got in office. So, it is what it is. I still love the guy. It's not
everybody, look at the squirrel.
Yeah.
No, listen, again, if I didn't agree with the podcast and the platform that you guys provide for the guys and girls, I wouldn't have come on as a guest. But yeah, listen, what's the hashtag that Ron Lason's going to put up? Agree to disagree?
Yeah. He likes to disagree with me. He likes to disagree with me more often than agree.
I just want to point out that I'm not able to read the comments. So if anybody's making comments or making some inappropriate jokes about me, I'll have to check it out on the replay. And by the way, Ron Lason is probably one of people I got to know on this job, and it was through my friend Natalie when she worked at Candidate Assessment. But yeah, listen, as far as the perception that people have about being in the union or a delegate or a board officer, I tell everybody, if you don't like what your delegate's doing, challenge her, get involved, all right? Get behind the curtain and see what really goes on in the kitchen, all right? I did, all right? I often tell people I'm the guy that got to Oz and went behind the curtain and found out what really happened. And it changed my perception of a lot of things. I'm not anti-union. I'm not anti-DEA. I was raised in a household where if you feel the need to ask a question, ask it, even if it makes people in a room uncomfortable. When I was elected as a trustee, I didn't prick my finger, I didn't burn the card, but I did make a promise to the detectives that entrusted me that I would do the best job I could to advocate for them and to voice their concerns. And I took that to heart, and I sat at that table at 26 Thomas Street and at DEA meetings, and I would ask questions. And by doing so, I ostracized myself. And I knew it. And there was times I walked out of those meetings where I was told I just killed my union career, and I was okay with that. All right. You know, I once had a conversation with somebody on the executive board that if you need me to mop the floors for the next 10 years of my union career, point out the bucket and I'll do it. All right. You know, to this day, the union aspect of my career has been very rewarding to me. I met a lot of great people. There's nothing better than helping somebody when they're at their quote unquote rock bottom. I think because of my life history on the job, I was able to connect with people in a manner that other people weren't. I had other board officers who would contact me when one of their detectives maybe had a problem with alcohol and say, hey, Pat, do you mind speaking to this detective for me? Because I speak the language. All right. I know what it's like to have that problem. All right. I know what it's like to sit there in an ER and say, my career's over, and think it's over. And you know, you walk people through it. Great opportunity I had as a union person, and I won't name the person, but I did get his permission to talk about it, was a great friend of mine. Met him early in my career, and he had a problem, and he had an issue, and I was contacted by a family member. And this person lived out in Long Island, and I met the brother one day outside the house, and lo and behold, we knocked on the door. The door opens, and there he is, my friend and co-worker behind the door. He says, holy crap, what are you doing? I said, you won't believe this. I was driving down the block. I saw your brother. Got out to say hi to your brother. He goes, oh, so-and-so's home. Let's go visit him. He goes, oh, it's great. Come on in. My friend turned around, took 3 steps, turned around and says, I'm not going. And you know what he meant by that. And he had put up the wall right away. And it was 5 hours sitting at a table negotiating. And it was very difficult to have that conversation with my friend. There was words said at that table that were hurtful, but they weren't said at me. They were said in anger about being confronted about an issue that had to be addressed. But I will say this. It's the only time in my union career when I had to have that talk with somebody that I had a card pulled on me that I really had to defend hard. I didn't go to the farm. I didn't go to rehab as a part of my sobriety. The night I had my off-duty incident, I was ready to go. And it wasn't required. So my union at the time, the PBA, didn't recommend that I go. In hindsight, I think it would have been a better start to my sobriety. Gives you that foundation, whether you choose the spiritual aspect of AA or you try to go on your own like I did. But I didn't go. And my friend turned around and goes, I'm not going because you didn't go. And I literally sat at the table going, holy crap, how do I handle this one? And it took a lot of my Bronx Irish charm. But eventually my friend saw the light, made the decision voluntarily to go. And we took a long ride out to a farm. And every year on the anniversary of that car ride, I send him a meme of people farming. And he calls planting carrots. Great guy. He has followed the path since that day. And it's probably one of my more rewarding union experiences. By the way, he still owes me for the Diet Pepsi and the Yodels, and I'll never get paid back.
Would you get him a 6-pack of Diet Pepsi?
We took a snack stop on the way out.
Well, let's segue into that. I think that's great, right? You talk about sobriety. You took a vow of sobriety. Obviously, you connected with people with that, helping them out. So what are your thoughts on mental health at the time? What was the mental health apparatus to help cops, whether it was the job or the union? What did you see as you retired? And what do you think, if anything, should be implemented for mental health? Because we have an epidemic of suicides. It just keeps getting worse and worse. I say it's the culture. What are your thoughts?
I wish I had an answer, because if I had an answer, nobody would go through what you and I and John and everybody on this job, unfortunately, has gone through. I've lost countless friends through suicide. Fellow board officer, Joe Calabrese, Brooklyn South. Great guy, made me laugh. Paul Federico was another detective that I got to know on the job who tragically took his life. Law enforcement as a whole needs to embrace the required coverage for somebody to put up their hand and say, I need help. There's something wrong. You know, we have these forced job training videos that they make you watch. So you get credit and it shows up on your CPI. But it is a stigma. It's a very negative stigma for a MOS to put their hand up and say, I'm not right. There's something going on. And it doesn't mean you're suicidal. It could be stress, marital, financial, career-wise. I'm not ashamed to say that at points in my career, I sought help professionally. And to this day, I still do. I speak to somebody on occasion when I need to. Very helpful to me. There's nothing better than having a professional tell you you're not crazy. You're just a person going through a rough time. All right.
If you don't mind, Pat, what were you experiencing that you sought help?
Initially, I was going through a divorce, and I just knew that I was having difficulty handling it. You know, I was 38 years old, and I had this false belief that my life was over. You know, I'm like, who's going to want a 38-year-old guy? You know, but it was a normal occurrence for somebody going through a sudden, unexpected social status change in their life. You know, I was built on the concept of you meet somebody, you marry somebody, you stay with them for life. You know, I had that last remaining connection to the people that your toaster's broke, you don't get a new one, you fix it. All right. You take it down to the shop on the corner and you have the old guy who tinkers with it. All right. Yeah. So that was my initial interaction, and it was great. I remember the first two therapists I had gone to see, I literally walked out within 10 minutes because I didn't have that connection with somebody. And I'm very grateful to myself for allowing myself to speak to the third one. And to this day, I speak to this person as needed if there's things going on in life. You know, great line I heard was, it's okay not to feel okay. All right. Life has a lot of stressors. Being in law enforcement is even a bigger stressor. All right. We all saw what happened starting in the riots. We went from in 2001, I was in a profession that was put on a pedestal. We were rock stars. Everybody loved us. You guys are heroes. You guys are great. You know, 20 odd years later, they hate us. They're spitting at us as we walk by in public. All right. The educational system is now brainwashing our children to view police as the bad guys. I went to school. Cops weren't the bad guys. Cops arrested the bad guys. So, but yeah, it's a stigma that needs to be broken down. And I know there's a lot of venues, and the one suggestion I can make to the department is talk is not going to solve this problem. Actions will solve this problem. You know, if you're active on the job and you raise your hand and you need professional help, all right, your firearm being taken away from you it should be the last thing you worry about. Cops, I don't think are worried about having their firearm taken away. I think they're worried about having their firearm taken away and then unable to be able to make overtime, which unfortunately most cops on this job now need to pay the bills, to keep the roof over the house, and to put their kids in private schools, or to fund their kids after school sports activities or music or dance. All right. So I don't think years ago it was, I don't want to lose my gun. I don't want to be a part of the rubber gun squad. You know, I think now it's, I need that gun to make overtime, to do the transit overtime, to do the audio overtime, to do the pre-tour overtime. All right. So the job has to find a solution to encourage people to come forward, put their hand up. And if the situation arises where we need to remove the firearm for a safety issue, still allow that guy or that girl to pay the bills. Don't eliminate one stress and then create another stress.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Well said.
So we're, Pat, listening to you, you sound like a lifer to me. You sound like someone who would be forced off the job. They would say, Pat, you're too old. You got to go. Maybe we'll find a deputy commissioner spot for you somewhere. But until, maybe the mayor likes you. We'll introduce you to him, but you got to go.
I don't think the mayor likes
you're too old. What brought you to retirement, dude? I gotta ask you because I'm sitting here listening to you, and I don't you don't sound like somebody that wanted to leave the job. You don't.
There was a period in my life I was hopeful and begging to make 20. You know, got involved in a union, and that kind of probably gave me an extra 5 years. There was a period where I thought I was going to do 30 or 35 years. I never wanted to be a lifer, although everyone always said, you're a lifer, you're not going anywhere, you love this job too much. And I did. I absolutely love being a cop. I love being a detective with the NYPD. I saw the department changing, and I saw entities that I was involved in changing. And I wound up experiencing a job in life epiphany. And I made the decision that I did not want to be a part of what I didn't agree with anymore. So anybody that knows me knows that Natalie Brill was my best friend on the job. And one of just, I can't express to you and to the podcast the love that I had for this woman in a non-relationship setting. I hope and pray that everyone finds Natalie Brill in their life, whether on the job or off the job, that can provide so much happiness, laugh, joys. The thing I loved most about Nat was she told it to me straight. And when I was wrong, she told me I was wrong. But more than not, we agreed. And I always said that if Nat was around when his podcast was on, she'd be the /1 commentator. All right. She would be a great guest to have on. Natalie was diagnosed with 9/11 related breast cancer. And I was very involved with her as she battled. And in typical Natalie fashion, she didn't let people know how bad that battle was. My union career afforded me the opportunity to go on full release, which means I was no longer assigned to the command. I was assigned to the DEA office. And one of the best things I ever had there was, as Natalie battled cancer, I had the freedom to spend time with her, to visit her when she went for chemo. I tell everybody, Natalie never lost her battle with cancer. She never gave up. She just gave every single ounce of energy she had. And that was that. Natalie wound up being rushed to the hospital out in Long Island. And subsequently, she was transferred into a hospice unit. And
So
I spent 2 weeks with my best friend in hospice. And the battle was near its end. Sitting with your best friend, who you thought you were going to walk out the door with 30 years old. And she turns around and says, I don't think it's worth it anymore. She goes, I'm not going to leave this room alive. I won't see my daughter turn 13. And I'll never collect a pension check. She goes, so everything we believed in, Pat, and we were told and we were taught isn't true. And that was the beginning of my decision to retire. I remember leaving hospice that night, and I went downstairs and I got in the car in the parking lot. And I called employee assistance, and there was a female there that I used to deal with when I was helping the detectives through the union. And I ran through the whole scenario, and she says, Pat, perfect. Give me the guy's name and number, and I'll call him tomorrow. And I said, it's me. I'm the one that needs help. I'm angry. I wasn't like in a place where I'd hurt myself, but I knew I was just too angry. I was so angry I couldn't drive my car. And we literally spent over an hour on the phone, and she got me to a place mentally where I was able to, get back in. So that was really the defining moment that I said, I think it's time that I start worrying about Patrick Donohue first and primary. I've always put people's needs and concerns ahead of me. And unfortunately, it took sitting in hospice out in Long Island with Natalie to realize that. The job on September 12, 2001 said, "We will never forget." That's not true anymore. They have.
You know what, Pat? I would like to honor. I didn't know Natalie personally. There's a lot of good comments here, but the way you speak about her, I think we should honor her and her legacy. And her legacy lives through you and her friends, and people are mentioning her here. And obviously, she seems like she was an amazing person. There's a lot of people that have been touched by Natalie, and I'm glad that you carry her in your heart. And you don't have to be a cop forever to have that spirit in you. And I think that's one thing that we really identify in this podcast. Through myself and John, and you, and Rob Lukash and Ron Layson and Sal Greco and Marlon Bethel and all our friends and listeners that have been on this podcast. You don't have to be a cop anymore to have that spirit. But I love what you're saying here. You're such a compassionate person, which is it's funny, right? You have so much humor behind you, and you're also compassionate. And I find that people that are humorous are usually very humble and have that compassion behind them, and that's why they can be humorous. It says a lot about you. Yeah, you really are an amazing person. You got amazing character. So let's talk about So here you are in your career in the union. What other aspirations did you have with the job? Did you want to eventually move up in the union? Did you see yourself being the president of the union? Is that something that you wanted to do, or you just enjoyed knocking around, just work, helping the troops?
Wanted to be a cop. Never thought I'd be a detective. Became a detective. As far as my union career goes, I was never one to, I want to be the president. I want to be the top dog. Genetically, anything that God gave me wasn't going to get bigger, despite me moving up the ranks and position-wise. So I was happy with that. There's been a false narrative put out there about me that the reason I separated from the union was because I didn't get a spot that I was allegedly promised or whatnot. That's not the truth. All right. Again, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. If people want to put it out there that I left because I didn't get a promised spot on the executive board, not going to change their mind. All right. Don't let the truth get in the way of a good narrative, right? Is that the old saying? But yeah, I left on my own volition. Again, Natalie's passing and the time I got to spend to her was a pivotal moment in my life. It actually started before that. There was a detective in Intel, great guy by the name of Anthony DiCarlo, good friend of mine. We used to have a commonality with cigars and fancy socks. And I was at a GO15 one day up in Manhattan North and got a text message to call as soon as the GO15 is over. Next thing you know, I'm in a car racing out to Brooklyn. Anthony had tragically passed away in his house from a non-job related incident. Walking into that house and meeting his wife, Maria, and the daughters, and just seeing the aftermath of, a vibrant, beautiful human being that had a personality that was compassionate and giving. Excuse me. And in a second, it's gone. And that was like a spark plug for me. Natalie's passing. Towards the end of my union career, I'd spent a lot of time with people suffering from 9/11 related injuries and illnesses. In the beginning of my career, there were detectives that I did not know personally. And then towards the end of my career, there were people that I knew personally. And again, I'm not ashamed to admit it. It was very difficult for me to deal with that. There was a detective 1PP by the name of George Moreno. I got a call one day telling me he's having a kid. And I'm like, George, you're too old. What do you mean you're having a kid? And here he is at the high of life. 2 weeks later, he calls me up. I have cancer. All right. Here's a guy who is just celebrating the birth of a child. All right. And watching George go through his battle. It wasn't an easy battle. All right. Watching somebody who's vibrant, working 1PP, laughing, to you're literally with 6 other people trying to transfer from a bed in Sloan Kettering into another bed. And, the look I got, the screams I heard George make, I'm not ashamed to admit they still carry with me. There's a legendary MOS by the name of John Walker. John Walker was an OCCB legend. John and I had gone to high school together. John had contracted 9/11 related cancer, and ultimately, John lost his life due to the 9/11 cancer. Going to visit a detective in the hospital that has 9/11 cancer and is dying is a difficult task, and I do not wish that on anybody. When you go to the hospital and it's a friend that you've known for 35, 40 years, it was very difficult for me. It impacted who I was. It impacted the way I thought. And again, I'm not ashamed to admit that as a result of those experiences, I once again reached out to my mental professional help because I knew I was having trouble. Right. And I think that stigma that we talk about is once you get into that acceptance that it's okay to talk to somebody, the indicators that you are having a bad day or you're having a difficult train of thought, you now say, oh, I know what's going on, and you can activate your support system. Yeah, so I decided it was time to start worrying about Pat Donohue for a while, and I transitioned into I'm going to retire. I told everybody I knew I was going to retire. I just didn't know the date. At the time this experience was going on in my life, I still was on full release at the union. I made the decision to leave. I decided I needed to go back to command. I wanted to go back to command to make overtime to benefit my pension. It's the first time I've been selfish in my career where I said, I got to worry about me. I was not happy with the union at that time. I was not happy in the direction that it was going. And I tell everybody with the utmost respect, the union I joined when I first became a delegate and a board officer was not the same union I left. Okay. I think constructive thinking needs to take place. And when somebody sits in a room and asks a question that makes people uncomfortable, I think the solution to that is embrace that outside the box thinking rather than ostracize that person and say, he must be crazy for asking that question. Why is he asking that question? Well, I'm asking that question because I have a responsibility. As a trustee with the Detectives Endowment Association, in the bylaws, as a trustee, I have a mandatory fiduciary responsibility to make sure that the union does things the right way. Any organization is only as strong and as good, not as the bylaws that they write, as the people that follow those bylaws. And again, I asked questions that I needed to ask. The easy way out would have been just sit there and keep quiet, and I didn't do it. I wouldn't do it. All right. I voluntarily gave up my release. I went back to command. My chief at the time was Chris McCormick, aka Red Rage, and is a good friend, and he afforded me the opportunity to go anywhere I wanted within his division. I chose to go to a team called the Business Integrity Commission team, which worked hand in hand with the BIC for New York City. And again, I was selfish. The reason I went there is about 2.6 miles from my apartment. So I went from a 45-minute to an hour and a half commute into Manhattan to literally 10 minutes. Spent my last year there, had a great time, learned a great way of doing investigations with the city. Prior to getting in the union, I worked in the no-fault insurance fraud unit out of the 405 precinct. I worked there for 12 years. I loved it. Again, fully embraced. I wound up becoming a lecturer. I would go to the National Insurance Super Academy in St. Louis and teach. But I realized that the job I joined wasn't the job that was present at the time. And I spent a year on the street, made some overtime, had some cases. I got the juices flowing again. And they always tell you, when it's time to retire. And I could never understand that concept. And an old timer in District 11, when I was a brand new rookie, said, kid, you'll figure it out one day. And for me, that day was the third Wednesday in June, 2021. I woke up and I got in the shower and I had the most amazing sense of peace and calm that I'd ever felt. It was just almost out of this world. And I remember it alarmed me. I made breakfast, I had a cup of coffee, and it just kept growing and it gets stronger. And I remember about 20 minutes after I had the cup of coffee, I just said to myself, I'm ready. It's time. Got in the car, drove to work, called my then girlfriend, said, I'm going downtown, I'm going to retire. And her exact words were, are you ready? I said, don't know, but we'll find out. Walked into my command, my sergeant time, Joe Paragallo, great guy who's about to retire now due to the financial restrictions of the overtime on the job. Says, what do you got today? I said, I'm heading downtown. He says, what are you doing? You got a GO? I said, no, I'm going to retire. He goes, Pat, you're funny. I'll see you later. Got in the car, drove downtown, went to the DEA office, requested some time with Paul DiGiacomo, walked in, said, Paul, I'm going to retire. Heading over. It's time. And after serving the union for 12 years and giving up so much of my time, my answer was, good luck. Turned around, walked out, and I knew I'd made the right decision. All right. Went across the street, told my chief. He begged me not to go. Like you guys picked up on the interview, he thought I had so much more to offer the job, and I did. But I now needed to worry about Pat Donohue. And walked over to the pension section, requested my paperwork, and started the process of retiring. And everyone kept asking me, are you ready? I said, I won't know until it actually happens. I burned my time. I worked a couple of wires to make some overtime. And then August 26, 2021, I was officially off the job. And it was such a rough day. I had about 3 months before I actually retired from when I decided to drop my paperwork, and I knew I was leaving. And I intentionally didn't go back to my office. I dropped 28s. I covered a wire in Queens because I wanted to start that separation from the job, because I didn't want to like pop in, and I wanted to see if this was the right mindset. And for those 3 months, I didn't miss it. I missed people. You know, I worked with some great guys: Joe Sands, Brian O'Keefe, Adrian Ramos, Jerry Natal, Nelson Pinella, great guys. You know, even my lieutenant at the time, who was a former ICO, but wound up becoming my team lieutenant, Dave Rosiak. I intentionally didn't go to the office, and I didn't miss it. And that's when I knew it was the right time. And even in my last week, Natalie was there. So I retired on a Friday. Everybody's supposed to go down the last day. You do your admin day. Nat's stepfather had passed away that week. And I remember Wednesday was the wake in Manhattan. And I said, well, 2 birds, 1 stone. I made some phone calls, and I went down Wednesday morning, got my shield and ID card, turned it in, and picked up my retired ID card, went to the wake, paid my respects to Natalie's stepfather. I saw her mom, Marilyn, and that was it. Friday morning, finance message is out. It's my last day. My phone's blowing up. Hey, Pat, come to the office. I want to take a picture. Hey, Pat, let's go grab lunch. No can do. Pat Donohue was on the 3rd hole at West Point, enjoying a round of golf and a cigar. So that's how I spent my last day on the job.
Pat, what was the best time of your career?
I need you to clarify that. Best time, most fun time.
When you think about the job, what do you think about? What's your favorite? If you could go back in time right now, I could bring you into a scenario. Where would it be? Where would you be?
Manhattan warrants. Manhattan warrants was probably my favorite time on the job. To paraphrase, and I won't get the quote word for word, but Ernest Hemingway said, "There is no hunting like the hunting of a man." Anybody who's ever had a job assignment where you go out and find people that don't want to be found and bring them back to court, you know, it's very rewarding. All right, the tours stink. I don't recommend it for anybody. You know, starting at 4:30 in the morning is horrible. You know, I used to work with guys in Orange County. I think they got up at 1 a.m. to get into work on time, but it was great. And I truly believe that anybody on this job who goes into the detective route, or even a sergeant or lieutenant, and wants to go the investigative track, they should be required to spend at least 2 years in warrants. The investigative tools, avenues, contacts that I made in Manhattan warrants, I was using over a decade later in OSID. And, I work with some great detectives in OSID, and they're like, how did you get that contact at HRA? I was like, oh, it's when I worked in warrants in 2002. So it was a great opportunity.
There's a great book. It's called Halftime. I recommend you read it. I recommend everybody read it because it talks about that all men need significance and purpose. So here you are in retirement. What's now your significance and purpose in retirement? What's in store for you in retirement?
My sole focus and primary focus every day is to do something to better myself physically and mentally so I can live as long as I can and collect as many pension checks. And that's it. Wake up in the morning and I say, what am I going to do today to better myself? All right. I re-engage with a passion that I had that I wasn't able to fully explore when I got on the job. I became a certified New York State basketball referee for both the boys and women's division in high school.
Nice.
As well as a baseball umpire for Little League and for New York State Section 1. And to go on that phrase, if you love something, you'll never work a day in your life, right? I love sports. Sports have been a tremendous benefit, both personal life, professional life, and now I feel I'm giving back. And I really do enjoy it. And if anybody who's active or retired and is looking for a side hustle, please, I'll post a link. Contact your local sports agency, whatever section you live in. Yes, is it a headache? Without a doubt. Are there parents that cross the line? Yes. Are there coaches that cross the line? Yes. Even players, all right? But I think having done 25 years in the New York City Police Department, there's not much that's going to occur at a sporting event that's going to shock me.
Pat, what do you think about the politics in New York City right now? Or let's say the last 5 years, the defund the police movement, the mandate, the mayoral race. Like, what are your thoughts on New York City politics currently?
I don't consider myself an overly political person. But obviously, when you join the police department, you eventually learn very quickly that politics plays a big part in the department as to the direction it goes, the acceleration of people into the executive ranks. I had a great opportunity to work under a bunch of mayors, and Rudy Giuliani took the city from a crime-ridden area into the most vibrant, safe, biggest city in America. All right. Then we had the financial acumen of Michael Bloomberg, who took over post 9/11 when nobody knew what was going to happen with the city. And to the de Blasio days, which was the beginning of the downfall. And now we have Mayor Adams. And it just seems that the promise of I'm going to be the law enforcement mayor, I was a captain, I was the police. Unfortunately, it's like many a political campaign. It just seems to be a campaign promise that wasn't enacted and didn't come to fruition. But it was nice at the time when he was running, because people wanted to disassociate themselves from the de Blasio era, the de Blasio regime, and focus back on, let's get New York back to where it needs to be, a law and order city. All right, let's bring the businesses back. But it's not happening.
You know what? Listen, I love hearing your stories. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You were a hell of a cop. You did. You really stood up for the men and women in the union. I love your story about Natalie. It really touches me, especially right now when I'm going through with my own son. The stories are amazing. So let's try to change gears a little bit and have a little fun. And tell us what you like to do for fun. I know you're refereeing, but what are some of your hobbies? I know you're not drinking now. If you're going out, you want to have fun. What are some of your hobbies? What do you do for fun?
Well, I recently bought an RV. No, what do I do for fun?
You got me all excited here. Here we go. I think I'm RV talk.
Eric's eyes lit up. Did you see that? He was like,
Yeah.
He did. I was okay. You caught me by surprise.
What do I do for fun? I like to stay active. I'm a big golfer. All right. I spend a lot of time golfing. I do have some property in South Carolina, so I travel back and forth. I have some friends that are flexible with their time, so we go golfing. when I was young on the job, I had somebody tell me, carry a journal, write things down. It'll make a great book when you retire. I recently found the journal I had when I was a transit cop. You know, I used to work 8 at night to 4 in the morning. I would sit on the train and I would jot down interactions of funny stories. And I think it's the makings of a book. I'm not really sure, but I'm in the beginning stages of starting that. I have a friend who was an English major in college, Jeannie Woods, aka Jeannie Martin from Woodlawn. She always encouraged me to explore my writing. She sees some of the stuff I put on social media, even on this podcast, and she always says I have the makings of a writer. I just need to fine tune it and explore it. So that's something that I'm dabbling in. Travel a little bit, like to travel around. But yeah, just trying to stay as vibrant, as active as I can. All right. People grow older, but you don't have to get old.
Pat, we ask 2 questions all the time, retired cops. I'm curious your response on this. We always ask, if you could go back in time, be that young man again, would you take the job again? I'll bring you back 1997. So yes.
100% yes.
What about now? You're 21. You're 21. It's 2025. New York City Police Department. Eric Adams, the mayor. Jessica Tisch, the police commissioner. Do you sign up again?
I probably would. And I think the reason I would take the job is because you would eliminate the life experience I had from 97 to 2022. An entity will only be as strong and as prosperous as the components that make it up. Yes, is it a good environment to be a cop right now? Absolutely not. Is it a department where, we want it to be? No. But to change how things are going, we need the best candidates possible. So we need that person that grew up and looked up and wants to be a cop. So I think if I still had the same people helping attitude that I had when I was 22, 23, 24, I would probably go into the police department. I probably wouldn't last 25 years like I did from 97 to 92, but I'd like to think I'd still have that desire to help people. I didn't become a cop to be rich. I didn't become a cop to be a detective. I didn't join the police department to be a union rep in the DEA. As nerdy as it sounds and as corny as it sounds, I joined the police department because it gave me the opportunity to help people. And I love that. All right. And I think any cop, once you lose that ability, that taste to help people, that's when your career is over.
Yeah, it says a lot about you. I think that says a lot about cops in general, right? Cops, firemen enjoy helping others more than helping themselves. And that's part of the mental health problem. We're so good at helping others, but sometimes we don't help ourselves. And that's why I think it's so big of you to say, hey, I sought a professional, and I still do, because that is helping Pat. Sometimes that's where we fail, is helping ourselves. I love your story. I think it's great. I think you're a hell of a guy. I think this is, whether you were in the union or with transit, I think you seem like you'll find a way to enjoy anything, and you'll find the good in it and the passion with it. So, I appreciate it. Please, everyone here, you got a lot of great comments. I mean, you're obviously a legend. People saying such great things about you. Like, share, and subscribe at this time. An hour 45 minutes into it. I think, though, I know you talk about those experiences. I think if you got on the job now, I think you wouldn't have the experiences that you had before. I think the experiences now would be far different. It's unfortunate, but the men and women that are getting on the job now, they're not having the fun and seeing the lens that we had. It's unfortunate. Hopefully we can change that around.
I agree, but I remember in 1997, like walking into command, and you get those salty old timers, which probably had 4 to 6 years on, tell me, hey kid, the job's dead. It's over. All right. They heard the same thing when they got on in 1988. All right. And then the cop that got on in 1974 was told by the veteran then that the job's dead. It's over. It is the most noble profession that exists in the world. There's not many jobs where you wake up in the morning and you leave your house, or you leave your apartment, and you leave your loved ones, and you're not guaranteed to come back. It takes a special guy and it takes a special girl to embrace that challenge and say, I'm still going to do this. All right. Same thing applies to the military. For law enforcement to prosper, which benefits society, business, families, they need people to become cops. The easy solution or easy answer right now is say, screw it, give it up, let it go, let it wither. All right. Remember, I came from the society where your toaster's broke, don't throw it out. Let's fix it. Let's take it apart. All right. And let's see if we can fix it and get it back. And that's, maybe the department should be looked at as a broken toaster right now. You know what? Let's go in there. Let's get a screwdriver. Let's take a few screws out. Let's pull a side panel off and let's see if we can fix it. All right. For those guys and girls watching on the podcast that are active, whether you're a new cop out of the academy or you're a high-ranking boss, all right, everyone that came before you and retired, all right, they're not turning their back on the department, all right? People love the department and they love what it stands for, all right? And we want the department to be the best that it can be. And part of that wish and desire is for people to say, it really hasn't been lately. And this is not about finger pointing, all right? Because finger pointing never works, all right? Identifying a problem is different than pointing a finger at somebody or something, all right? What we need to do is have an honest, real, constructive sit down and say, this is where we are, this is where we were before, and this is where we would like to go. And difficult conversations must need to take place, all right? My friend used to say, there's a coat room outside, leave your pride there when you come into the meeting, all right? And sometimes that's what has to be done, all right? And to those guys and girls still carrying the sector, working the squads, all right? Working narco, doing B&B, all right? OSA doing their sensitive, investigations. Keep doing what you're doing, all right? Because you have to, all right? The easy solution is to wake up and say, I'm done, all right? I'm going to turn my back on it. I'll give the bare minimum, all right? I played sports, and one of the analogies that I got and I use for life and for professionalism is if you don't go full speed, you're likely to get hurt, all right? Go full speed, give your best effort, all right? And usually the best outcome will take place.
No, I agree. I totally agree with you, Pat, because I think, it's the apathy amongst the people on the job, the people that were retired, and it's the apathy amongst the people who are voting, honestly. And so we discussed it here, how much politics weighs on the department, the morale department, how the department operates. It's my personal belief that, that the police department, city, the unions, they've lost their standing in New York City because our vote no longer matters. We don't vote. We don't vote as a block. I think New York City was used to be a city compromised of people that lived, worked there, their children went to school there. And I don't think New York City is that place anymore. I think New York City is a place where people live outside of it, come to it to work, and they have no say on the internals of it. What are your thoughts about cops living outside of New York City? And what are your thoughts about pay? Could cops live in New York City? Should they live in New York City? And the reason that I'm bringing that up is purely political, because I'm saying I'm looking when I read about past elections in New York City, from the formation of New York City all the way up until the 90s, I watch and I read about politicians pandering to the New York City Police Department. They were pandering to them. And why they were pandering to them was because of they wanted the vote. They wanted the union backing, but it wasn't the union backing they were looking for. They were looking for the vote of the members of the union. They were looking for that 7,000 voter block, that 15,000 voter block, that 3,000 voter block. So there was a pandering to the police department forever, and now it's gone. So what are your thoughts on that? I'm very curious.
So Again, I'm not an overly political person, but when I joined the DEA, I got involved in the political endeavors for the union. Years ago, a politician wanted the first responder endorsement, the PBA, the DEA, the LBA, the CEA, the state police, the Port Authority, Amtrak, because it wasn't a professional detriment or death sentence to be standing at a podium with the union behind you saying, these people endorse me. Society has shifted where that endorsement became not a good thing. But John, I'll hit you right on the head. Cops don't vote, right? They really don't. When the DEA would send out its announcement that, hey, we're looking for volunteers to help us out with the political action committee, we're going to be doing some campaigning on election day, all right? We'd send an email out, we'd make an announcement at the DEA delegate meeting, we'd make the announcement through the agenda notes that got distributed. At the time, there was maybe 5,100 members of the DEA. Maybe 15 to 20 people would volunteer. Now, don't get me wrong. Everybody has different life responsibilities, childcare, educational opportunities, this and that. But that lack of participation, and I'm sure it goes on with the other unions. I can't speak for the PBA and LBA and SBA because I'm not a member and I wasn't there. But, you know, we can't be a paper endorsement. You have to be a viable physical entity, put boots on the ground, okay, and get out there. The biggest suggestion I made to the political action committee with the DEA that wasn't taken upon was we should not be volunteering and spending our time supporting a candidate one day every 3 or 4 years, depending on the election cycle. All right. Get out there, get involved. All right. I created a concept called the captain and the crew, where you would divide the areas of geographical representation into a captain and a crew. So, John, you're the captain for Staten Island. John, you're responsible for getting 15 to 20 members together. Okay. Every 3 months, John, do me a favor, take your crew out to lunch, sit down, and reward them for doing some work. Okay. And then that way, when we need volunteers on election day or pre-election day, John, activate the button, get those guys and girls to come out. And they will, because their volunteer is being acknowledged and appreciated, not just one day every 3 years, but constantly. All right. And if you did that system, Putnam, Orange, Rockland, the Bronx, break it all down, I guarantee you're going to get more than 5 or 10 volunteers on election day. Okay. And there was nothing worse than walking into a campaign candidate's headquarters on the election day saying, where's all the volunteers? And I'm like, it's me. And like, they look at you like, just you? Like, yep. And you would come up with the talk, well, we're all over the place and we spread all our countless volunteers out. But it was kind of reflective of the diminished value of the endorsement by a first responder unit, a police unit. So, again, I'll go back to what I said about my life and my career. The more you put into something, the more you get out. So for the DEA, for other entities and law enforcement throughout the country, NAPO, FOP, all right, got to get boots on the ground.
You got a lot of great comments on here. The friends and listeners to the podcast, they love you. You're a big part of this podcast since the beginning. It's a big help. It really is. You have so much engagement in the chat. So Stephen S. is giving you a shout out. Coffee and donuts. Thank you. $10. He's always here. I think you interact with him quite often. It says right on, positively positive, Pat. Positively positive, Pat. Try to say that 10 times. Never give up. Thank you. Thank you, Pat, Eric, and John. Yeah, shout out to you, Stephen S. Great friend to the podcast. But you really are a huge part of this podcast. Always engaging, coming up with some great stuff. We really appreciate it. You got a lot of words of wisdom. We value your opinion. So before you get out of here, you got great stamina. I know it's close to 2 hours. What are your thoughts on the role of the union now? And especially, what do you think that relationship should be with the upper echelon, with the cops, and with this podcast, and with anyone else podcasting, giving their opinion about policing?
Well, first off, I'll just touch on the acknowledgement by the podcast listeners. And I haven't been able to view the chat, so I can't see the comments. But I don't agree with everything that you and Eric and Sal and Marlon will put out as content. And I think that's a great thing. because there has to be constructive and objective thinking and that so forth. Your podcast gives myself and other people a platform to have an open discussion, an open dialogue, and that needs to take place. You can't be in a room with 10 people and have nobody, 10 yes men are never going to take an entity to the best maximum level. All right. Again, and I appreciate the opportunity to get on. I forgive Jonathan Frederick for pulling sergeant rank and moving ahead of me in the guest schedule, but I guess his insecurity needed him to go before me, but that's okay. I'll let that go. Where do I think the union needs to go? There's a saying I heard a long time ago: people don't resist change, they resist being changed. So if a union is operating with the mindset in 2025 that it operated in 2010 or 2000 or 1990, then it's doing a disservice to its members. You have to actively embrace change and encourage it. Open dialogue, free thinking is a mandatory business requirement for an entity to go to a different level. I love my time with the DEA. I'm proud of it. I don't like, it's not a part of my life I've eliminated. I wish them the best success. And I hope that it ultimately comes down to what's best for the member and not best for the union. Because sometimes it's the membership that drives the union. It's not an easy task, and I will defend them, and I'll defend every union person. There is a misnomer on this job that once you get into union, your life becomes simple. Not true. It was very difficult to sit in an office or go to uniform detail and be that union person, because sometimes you would get it from the troops. Sometimes you would get it from the bosses. All right. I think at one point it stunted my promotional opportunity within the job. So, it's not all dinners and drinks and steak dinners for those guys and girls that think it's out there. All right. I encourage everybody.
Some dinners.
What'd you say?
I said some dinners. Just kidding.
Listen, I'll be honest. The guys and girls that are working don't want to hear this, but going to certain events eventually become a task, and you go there and you punch your ticket and you don't want to be there. And you have to embrace the opportunity to go out and meet people. All right. Those days I went into the union at 7 o'clock in the morning and I didn't go home till 11 o'clock at night. And I'm not comparing that with anybody who's worked in the squad chasing 0 hours sleep on a homicide, or the guys and girls in narco that are, that are chasing the Kilo ferry and everything like that. But it's a difficult job, and the department members need union representation, because as bad as they are getting treated now, and we see it, imagine if they didn't have that protective entity standing behind them that says, no, you can't do this. All right. No, we're fortunate. We're lucky. You go to some states where there is no union and there's no representation. You want to talk about having a tough day at work? When you walk in and you get fired on the spot, all right? There is no charging the specs. There is no disciplinary system. There is no giving the opportunity to plead your case and to have a union lawyer stand by you and fight for you. So, they are doing a job that at times I don't think is acknowledged and appreciated by as many people as it should be. It's easy to put the piñata up and hand everybody a stick and say, go ahead, guys and girls, whack at it. Let's break this thing apart. All right.
Well, I mean, I think really the highlight was 2020, where the unions, 2022, 2021 into 22, where there was a real anti-union take. I mean, because we did see people fired without receiving charges and specs, without receiving an administrative charge or a criminal charge. And that's where it wasn't just the DEA. It was all the unions. They were basically like, oh, this has nothing to do with us. This isn't a job action. You're like, wait, I'm being fired by my department without being charged. I'm being placed under the threat of being fired. without due process at all. You're just giving me 7 days, not even 7 business days. Job's not willing to have a discussion with me. The medical division's not willing to have a discussion with me. The reasonable accommodation unit's not willing to have a discussion with me. Diversity, equity, inclusion's not willing to have a discussion with me. And I mean, and that to me, I was never a union guy. I kind of was like, thought the union did good things. I was political. I looked at the national politics of things. I was very familiar with city politics, but I never had seen anything like that in my life. And I was like, what is happening here? And that's when I started looking at the donations. Who are they donating to? Why aren't the unions helping us? Like, why am I being told, yeah, good luck, kid? You're gonna, here's your choice. Go get the shot, take the termination, or have a nice life. Good luck. You're a smart guy. You'll do it right in life. And I think that's the time when you saw an uprising of people who were forced to put something in their body they didn't want. And they took it or they didn't. And they were either terminated or they made a decision like I did and said, you know what, I'm just going to retire early. I'm not willing to do this. And I think so, like, that was basically the origination of going out on social media, having cops going out on social media and creating a platform where people give their thought, because I don't think it's just a union take where it's like, you can't ask questions. It's the whole job. You can't ask questions. You can't give your opinion. You're not entitled to opinion. And yet all we hear is, we care about you. There's help. And it's not just a knock on the union. It's a knock on the overall job. You look at the health and wellness, their motto is, if it's important to you, it's important to us. It's like, well, all right, I'm about to be fired. It's just pretty important to me. Can we talk about it? No. You got 7 days or you're getting terminated. And so that's really when I think the union started feeling a lot of heat from the rank and file. What were your thoughts on the mandate and that whole thing and the union's actions during that time?
I remember the first discussion we had in the office where they were talking about COVID-19, and I remember hearing one of the board officers saying this has the potential to be a worldwide global pandemic. And I still hear those words echoing in my ear, and nobody ever thought it would get to the level of it did. The amount of discussions and meetings and consultations with House attorneys, labor attorneys, in regards to the efforts to afford the members the right to not put the vaccine in their body if they didn't want to, took place. Trust me. There was healthy discussions at a table. There was frustrating discussions at a table. There was legal precedent being set in courtrooms around the country that kind of directed where, our efforts went. Full disclosure, I did get the vaccine. I did not want to get the vaccine. At the time, my father, who is still alive, did not have the opportunity to get the vaccine. And I would meet my dad for golf, or I'd meet my dad for lunch or breakfast. That was one of our things. And he told me he was not comfortable doing that anymore because of my involvement in the city, representing people that were sick, being around and I made a decision that I would get the vaccine. So that way I could spend more time with my father. And I fully acknowledge that if I got the vaccine and it took 5 years off my life, but I had more time with my dad, I would be worth it. So, I did take it. There was a lot of conversation with members at that time. And for everyone that called me, please know I answered the call. I returned your text message. I'm sorry that we couldn't through my representation, couldn't give you the opportunity to fight what took place. It's one of my biggest regrets that took place while this job was, men and women were forced to give up employment for a personal decision. My argument was, and I said it in the trustees meetings at times, was this was not a mandatory subject of a collective bargaining agreement at the time of a member's hire. When I joined the police department in 1997, I had certain requirements that I had to provide to the job to allow me to be a New York City police officer. Don't change the rules in the middle of the game and force the members to switch. That was expressed. So for the Johns and the Erics and the Marlins and everybody else that brought that voice and concern to me, I reiterated that. I repeated that. Okay. And I'm not trying to wash my hands of what took place, but I was only the trustee for headquarters at the time. I only had so much ability to have an impact on the process that took place. But for every guy and girl that went through this process, I'm sorry I couldn't be part of a group that gave you the solution that you wanted. I truly believe that if there was ever a DOJ type audit of the department's response to COVID and what took place afterwards, PPE acquisition and disposition, the membership that were forced to take something and put it in their body that they didn't have full knowledge of, FDA approval, and then those that said, no, I'm not going to do this for religious or whatever beliefs, and they were told, you need to leave this job. I think there would be criminal liability. And that is my 100% honest belief. All right. And for those that made that courageous decision to stand up for their beliefs and say, I'm going to forfeit my pension, I'll forfeit or diminish my pension, I'll give up my variable supplement because I believe in this, I applaud you. All right. And, know that although the solution may not have been done as of this date, a lot of effort was made to get that decision that you wanted to hear. Okay. I learned a great line from John McGuire. I don't carry a magic wand. I carry a pen. I can't make things disappear. I'm not a magician. I'm just a working detective who happens to have a union responsibility. Okay. I will do my best, but sometimes my best isn't best enough. And that's the best. That's the attitude and the result I took from there. I had friends that, when I say became angry with me on the phone, and you just have to take it and listen, But yeah, I really believe that the unions did work for the membership. Unfortunately, they didn't achieve the goal that the membership wanted, and I know that nobody wants to hear that. Okay, I'm glad to see that Marlon is now back in the loop with the DEA, communicating with Scott Monroe in an effort to continue the legal resources that were afforded to him at that time. Okay. Somebody made the comment earlier, positive Pat. I'm not always positive Pat, trust me. All right. I have a lot of Bronx in me. Okay. Part of the ability that I bring to the table is I like to think that I will think outside the box and I'll make comments. My mother said, don't ever be the guy that walks out of a room and somebody goes, I wonder what Pat's thinking. All right. Let him know. All right. Marlon had made comments earlier in the podcast where he made inferences that Brian McGuire didn't do anything to help him. Brian McGuire was my union partner in the DEA. He was the welfare officer for headquarters. He was a detective in JTTF. He's one of my good friends. I then, and still to this day, will take umbrage at that assertion. All right. Again, like Eric says, everybody's entitled to opinions. It's okay to disagree. Okay. I take umbrage to that. All right. And I'm not attacking Marlon, and I'm not.
No, as well.
All right. But I was aware of what was going on behalf of Brian and the DEA to assist Marlon at that time. It was right when I was beginning to separate from the department, and Brian had taken on more of an administrative responsibility for the headquarters division of the DEA. Okay. Maybe there's some things that I'm not aware of that took place between Marlon and Brian, but knowing Brian and having worked with Brian for 3 years, I was fortunate to have a union partner like him. When the vacancy for headquarters trustee and welfare officer opened up, myself, Brian McGuire, and a couple other guys were looking to run for the trustee election. Brian and I are very similar. Brian and I have very close social circles. We literally would have knocked each other off had we run together for the trustee spot. Brian and I met at a delegate meeting at Belmont. We sat down and we said, if we run against each other, we're going to knock each other off and somebody else is going to win. Brian and I made the adult decision that one person would run for trustee and one would run for welfare officer. And we would support each other, all right? Because we both said, if Brian and Pat represent headquarters, we got a really good team. And no disrespect to anybody else that ran, but I think that Brian and I offer the membership the best opportunity to represent them to the fullest, all right? So Brian was so smart in the beginning of his union career to realize I will rather work with Pat than run against him, cost him the trustee spot, at the same time cost myself the trustee spot. Okay. And Brian also trusted me that if I lost the trustee election, I promised him I would not turn around and then run again for welfare officer. And I didn't. I won the trustee election. All right. Brian became my welfare officer. He ran unopposed, and we had a great team. Okay. So, not to kick the hornet's nest, but I will take the opportunity to defend my relationship with Brian and know that as a union representative, he did the best he could every single time. Even in retirement, Brian is just as active with the DEA, helping the membership as he was when he was on the job.
I appreciate that. That's what we expect you to do. And we say the NYPD is a blue family, right? It's a family. Law enforcement's a family, and I believe that. And I have to say, all the unions reached out to me, except for the CEA. But all the unions actually reached out to me personally, spoke to me on the phone, in light of what's happening right now with my son's battle for cancer. And I said to them, they said, "Hey, is there anything we could do to help you?" And I said, "I just want to tell you, I appreciate that you reached out to me." And I said that anything John and I say on the podcast is not personal. But I did say this, and I told every union this. I said, "I'm just letting you know, if you're going to help me, I really appreciate it. But just keep in mind that I'm still going to do the podcast and give my opinion, even if it's in opposition. So if that is a problem, then please, you don't have to help me, because I don't want you to help me and that is going to buy me from stop talking. I'm just giving my opinion. It's not personal." And they all said no, they don't have a problem. I said, okay, I just want to make sure. And I have to say, even though I've been on this podcast and I just like I want to piggyback off what John said, I don't think we're anti-union and anti what's happening with the union. We actually care. And that's why we give perspective and opinion, where sometimes people are saying things behind their backs or saying something in the locker room, but they won't say it publicly. And that's why I would say John and I are willing to say what we say in private, we say it publicly. So I appreciate that you defend your friend, and you should. Whatever you're saying privately, you should be able to say publicly. And I have a lot of respect for that. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Listen, open dialogue and discussion has to take place. And, sometimes it has to be difficult. People have to, say my idea isn't as good as somebody else's idea. All right. And I agree with you. And, my thoughts and prayers are with you and your family. And I feel honored that you took the time out of your family's life today to be on the podcast with me. And it shows you who you are. Okay. I went to the wake of a family member of somebody that through the job has attacked me, ostracized me, and put me in a position where I could defend myself, but I don't believe would be a healthy dialogue. And I remember the day I went to his family member's wake. That person said to me, "I can't believe you're here." And my answer was, "I work with you. Your family's going through a difficult time and you had a loss. I will support you and I'll support your family. We're not going to have lunch tomorrow. We're not going out for dinner. All right. But I still believe that you can have that human compassion to it." Okay. One of the proudest things that I did with the DEA was myself and Brian McGuire, we re-engineered and re-energized the Detectives Endowment Widows and Children's fundraising golf outing. All right. I'm a big golfer. I've ran a lot of golf outings. And it was one of my things. And we kind of pitched it to then President Mike Palladino and said, "Hey, instead of saying why we don't do this anymore, let's come up with a reason why we can." And his exact words were, "All right, run it, see what you can do." All right. And we did it. And for 3 years, it was very good. It was very successful. The last year I was involved in it was 2001. It was supposed to take place in August, right before I retired. There was a rain out. And it was then delayed until October when I was no longer active with the DEA. I still was involved. The day of the rescheduled golf outing happened to be my Uncle Phil's funeral. He had passed away a couple of days before. Okay. Very few people from the DEA called me and said, "I'm sorry, your uncle passed away." All right. And whether you like a person, you don't like a person, a simple text message to say, hey, I know you really like this golf outing. It's one of your passions. Okay. The way I was treated when I exited the job and I left the union, I do not wish upon anybody. Okay. When I made the decision to leave the DEA, I literally walked in like an adult and I had a conversation with the then president. It was a Wednesday night. It was about 7:00 at night. Would you gentlemen care to take a guess at what the reaction was? I came in and said, hey, next Friday is my last day. I'm going back to command. Thank you for the opportunity. Great educational and professional learning experience. But I need to go because, and at the time, being in that office was not good for my mental health and it was not good for my physical health. And it was something that I battled with and I'd had discussions with close friends. So on a Wednesday night, I walked in at 7:00, said, hey, FYI, next Friday, my last day, I'm going back to command. What do you think the response was? Go ahead, John.
Yeah, bye. Bye.
No.
Have a night. Good luck to you.
I'm going to tell you what.
Yeah, take care. That's it. Yeah. Sure.
No. Are you ready? At the time, I had a DEA lease vehicle. Full release officers had a DEA lease vehicle. I was asked at that time, at that moment, to surrender the keys to the DEA vehicle that I had driven to work, and I was told to take the subway home. Wednesday night, 7:00, after years and years of faithful service, because I made an adult decision to benefit myself mentally and physically and pension-wise to go back to command. At 7:00 at night, I was asked to turn over the keys to my DEA lease vehicle. It's okay. By the way, I didn't turn the keys over. All right. I told them you would have the keys returned on the 1st of the month. All right. But, you know, despite that, I still went out and did my work for the membership. Okay. Like when I tell people I was ostracized, if I really wanted to pull back the curtain, I could, and it wouldn't be pretty. But I don't think that's healthy right now. And I think for an entity to move forward, okay, treat everything like a learning experience. All right. But that was just a little caveat that I think people needed to know that what I was subjected to at the end of my union career. All right. I went to Harvard for 6 weeks. I was accepted into a program at Harvard University where it was called the Harvard Trade Union Program, where I went and lived at Harvard for 6 weeks. I just started a relationship with a girlfriend at the time. And I went up there and I spent 5 days, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., learning about the history of labor in the United States. Okay. And I did that because it was an investment in me, which I thought I would be able to repay the membership. And it was a great learning experience. What I learned at the time was that Harvard did not like law enforcement, did not like first responders. I wanted to leave after the first week, to be honest. There was a professor there, I won't mention him by name, but he was very anti-law enforcement. But it was a great learning experience overall. I did everything I could to make myself a better union person. I went to the Harvard Trade Union program. I went to the Cornell CUNY Labor Studies program. I went to different seminars that were available. And I really do enjoy it. And I love it. And I encourage everybody, please, if you don't like what's happening, be a change. Challenge that person. Run in the election. Okay? And I hope that everyone has the fair opportunity to become a union representative if they choose to. All right? I have a lot of friends in the various unions, PBA, LBA, SBA, DEA, CEA. All right. I wish them all the best. All right. My phone number hasn't changed. If I can help you in any way, reach out, call. Okay.
You know, Pat, you know what I learned about you? You definitely were a hell of a ladies' man, because every story starts with, I had this new girlfriend. I'm like, wow, this guy's a ladies' man.
No. I'm not, trust me. No ladies' man here. But, you know, I had a 5-year relationship that started right before I went to Harvard and had a good time. And yeah, listen, the members of the police department need union representation. They have to have it. Okay. Again, any entity will only be as strong as the membership within. All right. Follow the bylaws. Put people in positions where they can do the maximum benefit for the guys and girls. Consequently, guys and girls have to realize that the union can't solve every problem. There has to be some self-governance of the membership.
Pat, anything we missed? Anything we missed on this interview? Been going on about 2 hours, 20 minutes. Did we anything you wanted to highlight before we wrap this up?
No, I just listen. Keep
Anything before we send you on the subway?
No, listen. For those guys and girls that are active or retired and they have children coming to an age where they might consider a career in law enforcement, all right, if we diminish the talent pool, any corporation, any entity, any unit will suffer. All right. Obviously, everybody wants to look out for the best interest of their child or the neighbor, but I was proud to be an NYPD member for 25 years. I'm proud to be a retiree of the NYPD, and I want the NYPD to prosper and to still remain and maintain that standard of the greatest law enforcement agency in the world. And that's only going to continue if the best candidates file for the test, take the test, apply, go into the academy, and go on patrol, become sergeants, go to the squads, rise the ranks and become the best they can. All right. And so those guys and girls that are still active right now, keep doing what you're doing. All right. Your work is acknowledged. It is appreciated. All right. For the bosses that are struggling to deal with the politics of what is happening above the rank of captain, I don't envy your position. I know it's difficult. There's probably a lot of lip biting and tongue holding back. Okay. But just know that there are people that believe in you. All right. And know that you're there for the right reasons. Before we end, I'd like to acknowledge that I came from a long line of family members of law enforcement. Countless cops, firemen, teachers, everything like that. Some are retired, some are active. One member of my family has allegedly the greatest hair combination duo on the job. Eric knows him. Eric worked with him in PSA 7. So I was told if I didn't get that plug in, that I would be disowned as a family member. It's ironic that I have to get a plug in because I believe that this gentleman does use hair plugs. But that'll remain to be seen. For those that retired, find something that you're passionate about. Okay. Volunteer work. It's great. Go to animal shelters. All right. Get involved in sports officiating. Find something that you love. I had a friend that did 30 years with the police department. He retired as a lieutenant at a highway. Retired, he moved down south. And I had a conversation with him one day, and he called me up. He goes, I don't have any hobbies. I don't know how to do anything other than be a cop. So I told him, well, be a cop down there. And he joined the police department in a town in South Carolina, and he's loving life. All right. So, just because you leave the NYPD doesn't mean you can't continue to be that person that serves his community or she serves her community in a good manner. All right. For those that are struggling with whatever you're struggling right now, I'm going to tell you, you're not alone. All right. Somebody has had that struggle before you. Somebody shares that struggle with you right now. And somebody's going to, unfortunately, pick up that struggle in the future. Okay. Raise your hand. Ask for help. All right. If you work with somebody and you see that struggle and they're not acknowledging that struggle, discreetly pull them to the side and say, hey, what's going on, man? You don't look the same. Are you okay? And when they tell you I'm fine, tell them, don't lie to me. Don't lie to me. Tell me what's going on. All right. Don't be afraid to lose your gun. All right. Don't be afraid to have a little career pause. All right. Because at the end of the day, what you're going through is not going to break you. It is not going to be the definition of you as a person. All right. The greatest rewards come after the greatest struggle. All right. Fight the fight. Life has so much for us to give. Okay. All right. And, don't be afraid. John, Eric, if you want, you can give them an email address through the communication chat. You can give my cell phone number. Okay. I don't have the answers, but I have 2 ears and I'll listen. All right. I'll pick that phone up at 4 a.m. I've done it before. All right. And for the guys and girls, even Juju, all right, you can help people. All right. You're probably in a position of power on the job. All right. But if I could end this appearance on the podcast, John, first of all, thank you. Eric, thank you. Guys and girls that were on the show and made comments. I didn't see it, but I acknowledge anybody that supported me. And for those that said I was a jerk and an a-hole, yeah, at times you probably were right. Okay. And I'll self-admit that. All right. I'm a cup of tea that's not for everybody. All right. I always tell people I'm the nicest a-hole you'll ever meet. All right. But I believe that my heart is in the ultimate right place. Okay. But again, find help. Doesn't have to be through the job. All right. I will tell you this, my time in the union with EAU, I work with angels. Some of those people did God's work that never gets acknowledged. And I know sometimes somebody will say, well, why did that guy in EAU get detective second grade? Or why did that girl get sergeant special assignment? All right. There are people that do things on this job that never get understood. And sometimes the acknowledgement is deserving. Okay. So again, thank you for everybody. I appreciate it. Eric, your family, God bless you. All right. John, I love your angry self. You're great.
Listen, shout out to you. Thank you so much. You showed a lot of stamina. It's almost 2.5 hours doing an interview. This is probably like a GO15 for me at CCRB. Pat, thank you so much. The people here love you. We love you. You're outstanding. Wednesday is a packed day. Like, share, and subscribe. Check us out, 12:05. We'll have Sal Greco live. And, of course, at 5:05 live, we have the good Rob Lucash and Ron Layson give you the executive perspective.
No, Sal Greco. Sal Greco's Tuesday, Thursday.
Oh, that's right. That's right. We switched. Right. My day has been totally off.
Yeah.
Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're back for Sal Greco. But tonight, we got the executive perspective. What's that, Pat?
Is that the Christmas tree from Linus in the background?
The Charlie Brown Christmas tree? That's
the Charlie Brown Christmas tree. I love it. You got the
he always wanted one. The Jewish kid, he always wanted a Christmas tree.
It's a Jewish Christmas tree. But yeah, I'm sorry about that. I stand corrected. That's right. We rescheduled everything. My mind's been a little bit out of it. I'm sorry. Tuesdays and Thursdays, Sal Greco. But tonight, of course, is the executive perspective. These guys have been doing a hell of a job. Honestly, they're going to be talking about body cameras tonight. They put on a hell of a show. I love their show. So check us out. Pat, thank you so much for being here. John, as always, we appreciate it. Pat, take us out, man. End the show. Thank you.
Boys and girls, go out, do something positive today. Say hello to somebody you've never met before. All right? You might meet a new friend.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, find us Unfiltered. We'll be back at you. Check out 1705, the executive perspective. Me and Eric will be back. We'll do a little roundtable Friday. Pat, would love to have you back. Legend in the New York City Police Department. Great all-around guy. You know what? If you're in New York City and you don't know who to vote for any office, I recommend writing in Pat Donohue. Whether it be city council, mayor, congressman, senator, write them in. Write them in, Pat. We need you in New York City. You're still there. There's no reason you shouldn't. Maybe not right now, but something you should think about, brother. I hear them. I hear somebody that actually cares about people and cares about New York City and cares about the New York City Police Department. Pat Donohue, legend. Thank you for joining us, brother. And guys, definitely, if you're gonna do a fundraiser of any sort, check out Fund the First. We've been having a lot of issues with fake fundraisers popping up on other sites. Please, there's only the one GoFundMe that Paul and his wife Chrissy Manicone put together for Eric. It's only that one. There is no other. I know 2 different groups have now made shirts. Blue Line Apparel have made a shirt for Derek, as well as Squad Life has also made a shirt. All proceeds go to Derek and cancer research. Check those 2 shirts out. We have links to both of those in the comments in the chat. But Fund the First, very unique platform. They don't charge any fees, and they also verify every campaign. So you can't just say, I'm going to do a fundraiser on behalf of Derek and do that. So they're not sponsoring. So they're now sponsoring the Finest Unfiltered, and we're happy to be part of that family. And we're going to try to do some highlights on unfortunately, the fundraisers that needed on the show as well. So, Pat, appreciate you, brother. Look forward to doing this again. Eric, love you, bro. And, we'll be back out there. Find us Unfiltered.
Ever wonder who helps our everyday heroes when they need support? Enter fundthefirst.com, a unique crowdfunding platform dedicated to first responders, their families, and their friends. Unlike typical sites, we don't take a cut. Every dollar goes directly to those in need. Whether it's for emergency medical bills, family emergencies, or equipment, fundthefirst.com is there. It's our chance to give back to those who risk it all for us. From police officers to firefighters, these heroes deserve our support. Want to make a real impact? Check out fundthefirst.com and show our heroes that we've got their backs. It's time to support those who always support us.
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888 901 Blue. That's 888 901 Blue.